Chapter 1178. In the floating celestial palace, the people in the hall saw two treasure lights flying out from the Mo Chiu cliff and immediately knew their intentions. Chi Hongchan said, "The Yuxiao school can't help but send help." Meng Zhen said, "If Hall Master Du Zhen can kill Chu Rui, my fate will definitely grow. I can't let him ruin it." Sun Jinren sneered, "How can I let them succeed?" He took out a treasure pot from his sleeve and tossed it out. It turned into light and flew out of the floating celestial palace in the blink of an eye, flying towards the south. Perfected being Shao pondered for a moment and said, "Let me deal with that branch." He shook his hand and a streak of fire followed him out of the hall. Before the two treasures that flew down from the Mo Chiu cliff could reach the north, they were intercepted by these two objects. Then, they chased each other and got entangled with each other. It seemed like they would not be able to get rid of them for a while. The people from the Yuxiao school knew that no matter how they used their treasures to help, the Qinsang school would be able to stop them. If they really fought with treasures and Shaoqing's side interfered with their killing swords, their losses would be even greater. However, they could not turn a blind eye when their ally was in danger. Even if they knew it was useless, they had to put up a front. Putting aside the effort on the surface, the only method that could truly threaten Zhang Yan was the Jade King snake from the Nanhua sect. Xiao Lingyun sat on the seat and held the heart concentration mantra to summon. At the foot of the Nanhua sect's first summon mountain, a huge snake with a body that was as bright as glass and crystal jade was sleeping. At this moment, its eyes suddenly widened and it woke up. The snake had a head but no tail. It was born with two heads, one in front and one at the back. The front head was male, and the back head was female. The male head had a neck and beautiful feathers. There was a single horn on the top of her head, scarlet red and short like a jade coral tree. The sharp teeth on the female head were exposed, and her face was covered with black lines that were modeled with different sizes, like the profound erosion runes. As it was activated by the mantra, its body only shook. He turned into a ball of dazzling cloud energy, silently passing through the mountains, moving along the earth veins, leaving the continent at an extremely fast speed. When he reached the eastern sea, he naturally turned north. After passing the Donghua continent, he saw a sea region. This was the path that Chu Rui had to pass through on his way south. Here, he stopped moving. Instead, he quietly lay dormant here. Looking from afar, there was only a cloud of smoke in the sky and the sea. It was impossible to tell what it was. As for the aquatic creatures in the sea, they passed through his body as if they didn't notice anything. At the same time, on the other side, Immortal Shi watched as the two beams of light flew away one after another. He turned his head and asked, "Should we go and help sect leader Chu?" Wu Yunbi disagreed. "Zhang Yan's body is mysterious, we can't do anything to him at the moment. It's useless even if we go up." He pointed to the severed demon. "It's better to think of a way to destroy that demon. As long as we can free sect leader Chu's two killing swords, there will be room for negotiation." Spiritual Master Shi said, "We can give it a try. However, there's no need for all four of us to go up against one demon. How about this? Elder Yuan and I will go up and take care of it, while the two of you spiritual masters can cover us from the side." Wu Yunbi said, "All right, let's do that." At the same time, he transmitted his voice to Zhou Ruying. "Be careful. If you see that something is amiss, you can retreat in time." Zhou Ruying was startled. He also transmitted his voice, "Senior Marshal Brother Wu, aren't you being too careful? Zhang Yan might be hard to deal with. But how could that monster be our match?" Wu Yunbi said, "I'm not worried about that demon. I'm just worried that after Zhang Yan defeats sect leader Chu, he will not be able to escape. Don't come back to cause trouble for us." Zhou Ruying was shocked. From the looks of it, it would be impossible to surround and kill Zhang Yan, and if he could kill Chu Rui, he would naturally be able to kill them as well. She said hesitantly, "Senior Brother Wu, then how about we retreat now?" Wu Yunbi shook his head and sighed, "That won't work. Yuanyang sect is considered our ally. How can we abandon them just because they are at a disadvantage?" We have to see the result. Zhou Ruiying said with hatred, if we had one more killing weapon, things would not be like this. Wu Yunbi said, maybe we could gain the upper hand for a while. However, Qinsang School is just nearby. They will be able to send help much faster than us. In this battle, we lost to sect leader Chu. But who would have thought that Zhang Yan is so fierce that he can't even defeat a cultivator who has cultivated his nascent embryo? What else can we do? While the two of them were talking, perfected Shi and Yuan had already arrived in front of the intercept demon. They immediately used their thunder techniques to attack. The intercept demon had been entangled with the two swords. Until now, it was covered in wounds. Although its injuries were not serious, it had lost a lot of vitality. At this moment, there were two more grotto heavens joining the battle. Moreover, all of them were attacking it. It immediately felt that it could not take it anymore. It shrunk its huge body to the size of several feet and floated away with the wind. Without the obstruction of this huge object, Dayuan and God Ming saw the opportunity. They let out sword whistles and were about to fly away. Who knew that at this moment, the Qinghang sword pill shook and suddenly transformed into thousands of light spots. Not only did it trap the two swords, but it also split into many sword lights and slashed towards where Shi and Yuan were. At this moment, Chu Rui was already far away. Without the restraint of the magnetic gold hourglass, he could naturally split the sword lights at will. However, the four of them were all concerned about their own lives. Although they did not have any killing treasures in hand, they still took defensive items with them. Perfected Shi was not flustered. He blocked with his sleeve and 1,000 leaf petals flew out. They danced in the air and received all the sword lights that came over. If Zhang Yan was here, he might be a little afraid. Now that there was no one controlling the real sword, it did not have many changes. It was naturally not difficult to deal with. He said, Elder Yuan, I will receive this sword light. I will leave the demon to you. Yuan Yiwen agreed. He took out a beast-subduing pen and waved it outwards. Immediately, many eagles of all shapes and sizes flew out. There were at least 10,000 of them. Perhaps the Yuanying cultivators could not deal with these demon birds, but to the grotto heavens, they could all be wiped out with a wave of their dharma. They were practically useless in battle. It wasn't that this was all he could do. Rather, he had used a trick, purposefully releasing the demonic birds and insects, in order to slightly attract the attention of the Dark North swords. If he succeeded, he would be able to help those two killing swords escape from their entanglement at an extremely small cost. Of course, if this did not work, he still had a backup plan. However, the Dark North sword did not pay any attention to him. Taking advantage of the two swords being held back by the clear swan sword light, he turned into a beam of profound light and shot south. At the same time, Chu Rui's last clone had also been killed by Zhang Yan. He once again turned into a beam of golden light and fled. If he was caught again, there would be no way out other than to fight with his life on the line. At this time, he had already retreated to the seas outside the Donghua continent. He saw a mass of fog in front of him, which seemed rather strange. He had a sudden thought. This place was extremely close to the main gate of the Taihao school. He guessed that this was something Yu Xiao had set up to receive him. His spirits immediately rose. This loss was because he had underestimated his opponent. As long as he went back and made some preparations, the next time he faced him, he would not be in such a sorry state. He thought to himself, Zhang Yan was not injured at all under the joint attack of those four fellow Taoists. With a wave of his hand, he could stir the clouds in the sky. It is very likely that he has cultivated that method of strength. And to be able to gain the upper hand against me, he must have cultivated above the 5th level of strength conversion. Such a strong body is comparable to a sky demon. As for how Zhang Yan had cultivated it, he did not understand and did not think too much about it. At this time, he was not far from the fog. This fog did not dissipate under the impact of his aura. He was even more certain of his guess, so he did not hesitate to expend his spiritual power. His Yuan core moved, and with a flash of light, he burrowed in and quickly disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan saw this scene from behind. How could he not know that there was something strange about this fog? He scanned with his Dharma eye, but he could not see through it. With a thought, he smiled coldly. The flying light did not change its direction and crashed into it. Just at this moment, the mist suddenly surged and suddenly turned from illusory to solid. It turned into the head of a 10,000 feet long snake. His body was in the mouth of the blood-red snake. The upper and lower jaws closed and he was swallowed. Xiao Lingyun was overjoyed and stood up. He clapped his hands and said, "It's done." This jade glaze king snake could only fight against a person from the heavenly abode. But it had one ability. This snake had a head but no stomach. No matter what it swallowed, it could move it to another world. Even if someone had strong spiritual power and could break out of the world, they would not be able to return to the real world. They would only be trapped in the void. Even if it was a person who had cultivated an yuan core, he would still die if he was swallowed into the snake's stomach. If Zhang Yan left just now, there was nothing he could do. But at least he saved Chu Rui. Once he entered the fog, his fate was sealed. Spiritual Master Bai Bai said, "Sect Master Xiao, Sect Master Chu hasn't come out yet. Wouldn't he be swallowed by the king snake?" Xiao Lingyun laughed and said, "Don't worry, my friend. This king snake is born with 2 heads. It's a friend and not an enemy. After swallowing the male head, it can escape from the female head. If it's an enemy and not a friend, it can trap it in another world. Even if it doesn't die, it won't be seen again." As expected, the female head of the snake raised and spat out a rainbow. It was Chu Rui. Shang Shooting took a look and smiled, "Sect Master Xiao, you have done a great service." Zhenren Kangjing stroked his beard and said, "That's right. Zhang Yan is the Qinsang School's Hall Master Duzhen. Once this person is eliminated, the fate of Qinsang will be greatly affected. Sect Master Xiao, you have done a great service." Hearing what he said, many people in the hall praised him. Even though Xiao Lingyun looked reserved, he was slightly proud in his heart. But at this moment, the king snake suddenly rolled and screamed loudly. Its voice was extremely miserable, and then 2 profound chi hands broke out from the snake's abdomen. After grabbing one side of the snake, they suddenly tore it apart, and a crack appeared on it in an instant. Zhang Yan's sleeves fluttered and he stepped out on a rainbow. Under the Xian Qi behind him, the king snake's body was broken into pieces. When Chu Rui saw it, his expression changed. He knew that the snake couldn't trap Zhang Yan. At this moment, he didn't choose to escape. Instead, he became serious and released his Dharma form as his nascent embryo trembled. Boundless golden sword rays opened up in the sky and shot out tens of thousands of miles. It was grand and magnificent, covering the light of the sun and the moon. He shouted fiercely and rushed down with thousands of miles of cloud light. He used all the mana in his nascent embryo to suppress Zhang Yan in one fell swoop while he was still in the snake's abdomen just now. Zhang Yan looked up and his eyes flashed. He waved his hand and a ray of light flew into his hand. He pressed his hand on the back of the sword and said, "Master Dark North, do you remember the time I joined forces with you to slash?" Dark North Sword laughed and said, "How can I not remember? Come, slash open this world with me." Zhang Yan laughed heartily as well, and then his expression turned solemn as he let out a clear howl and took a step forward. Instantly, his body fused with his sword, and he transformed into a brilliant ray of sword light that shot into the sky. Everywhere the ray of light passed, the golden light that covered the sky was torn apart by a single strike of his sword. Chapter 1179. When Zhang Yan slashed with his sword, it was as if the sky was really torn apart. The qi broke through the clouds, and gold fell everywhere. The spiritual vigor shook, causing the sea waves to roar, and the roars were like 10,000 thunders. The qi gathered by a third-stage realm cultivator's Dharma physique was extremely vast. Once it was broken, it caused countless golden lights to fall down like meteors. The entire eastern sea was splashed with waves without any signs of stopping. It looked like it was boiling. He followed the sword light and rushed for thousands of miles before he stabilized his chi dynamic and stood in the void. He turned his head and saw a beautiful galaxy in the sky falling into the sea. It looked very beautiful. In the next thousands of years, this place would be flourishing with aquatic creatures, and the island would be lush with vegetation. At this moment, among the thousands of lights, there was a condensed light flying out. It was the size of a rice grain and not very eye-catching, but he could sense that it was where the spiritual vigor was. With a glance, he knew what it was. After a cultivator in the grotto heaven cave cultivated the embryo, his chi dynamic was almost endless. Even if the Dharma body was broken, as long as a wisp of chi dynamic escaped back to the sect to cultivate, it could be cultivated again. If it was any other time, he would have let him take it off. However, this was a battle of life and death. He couldn't hold back, especially since the Xuanji Yang wall in the Yuan Yang sect could increase spiritual vigor. Who knew if he would be able to come out again after a long time? Therefore, he would not allow it to have a chance to revive. He raised his hand indifferently and pointed with his fingers. A thunder shock caught up and instantly shattered it. At this moment, the head of Yuan Yang sect, Chu Rui, had really and truly died in his hands. Even if there might be a part of his soul left in the sect, he could only turn around and reincarnate. He could no longer come out and cause trouble for the Qinsang school. However, since he had killed a sect leader, he had naturally made enemies with the cultivators of that sect. As long as he survived this tribulation of humans, he would not be able to escape. In this time, as long as he did not die, he believed that there would be a chance to meet him. At this moment, he suddenly heard an unusual movement in the sea. He looked over and saw that the two heads of the Jade Glaze King snake were twisting, as if they were going to connect to another place. He knew that it was still alive. He smiled indifferently and took out the North Sea sword in his hand. A sword light descended and instantly chopped the two snake heads into mush, completely ending their lives. This strange snake that the Southern Flower sect had reared for thousands of years was also unlucky. Zhang Yan knew that after the tribulation, he would definitely fight with the Southern Flower sect, Taihao sect, and the other sects, so he was prepared for these sects' divine arts and means in advance. He had investigated quite a lot of information about the Southern Flower sect, and most of it came from Tao Zhenren. Moreover, because he had met Daoist Crane in the past, he had long since learned that the Jade Glaze King snake had the ability to move a world. This time, he was able to avoid it. What he relied on was a divine art he had obtained after reaching rank 5 in Strength Path. It was called, One with the World. After this divine ability was executed, it was equivalent to fusing into one with the heavens and the earth in this world, and all external forces couldn't come into contact with it. So, he seemed to have fallen into the snake's mouth on the surface, but he wasn't actually swallowed, so he naturally wouldn't be transported to another world. However, this karmic cause suddenly appeared and disappeared. If he wasn't careful when using it, he would only end up getting tired. If it was someone else, they might not dare to use it like this. The Jade Glaze King snake was covered in jade glass scales, and even killing swords might not be able to cut through it. If it tangled with him, Chu Rui would be able to escape smoothly. In order to finish it off in the shortest time possible, Zhang Yan took a risk and escaped into the snake's belly. That was why he took the risk and escaped into the snake's belly to break it open. At this moment, on the Mo Chiyu cliff, the hall was dead silent. No one could believe that a third-layer cultivator who had cultivated his origin embryo would fall into the hands of Zhang Yan. It should be known that a person who had cultivated his origin embryo, just his clone, was comparable to an ordinary grotto heaven, and he alone could fight against a whole sect. Even though Chu Rui was at a disadvantage just now, no one had thought that he would be defeated and killed. They couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. If he could kill this Yuan Yang sect master, then he could kill anyone here. Tan Dingxian said bitterly, "If I remember correctly, this person has cultivated for less than 1,000 years." Shang Shooting thought for a while, then shook his head and sighed, "We can't judge a genius with common sense. With this person, Qinsang School's luck has increased by 30% for no reason. Jinren Kongjing said calmly, it's just a temporary loss. The overall situation is still in my hands. If Qinsang school was this powerful, they wouldn't have allowed Zhang Yan to come out and solve the problem alone. He slightly leaned to the side and said to Wu Yunqing, who was sitting down, Zhengxing Peak Master, please write a letter to Yuanyang sect to comfort them. Also, tell them that even if sect Master Chu is not here, our previous promise will not change. Wu Yunqing bowed and said, Hall Master Kongzheng, thank you for your consideration. I will send a letter to you right now. At this moment, Xiao Lingyun's expression was uglier than anyone else's. Seeing that the spirit snake guarding the mountain of his sect was slaughtered, he was shocked and angry. This snake was left by the founder of the sect. Now that it was killed by him, he felt ashamed to face his master. He suddenly stood up and solemnly bowed to Tan Dingxian, saying, Sect Master Tan, if this person is not eliminated, we will not be able to rest in peace. Please send a mystic technique to kill this person. As he spoke, he pointed in the direction of Zhang Yan, his voice full of resentment. Sect Master Tan could not help but sigh. This was the second time that Xiao Lingyun had asked him to use this technique. However, this mystic technique was related to the overall situation and was not something that he could decide alone. He could only say, if fellow Taoist Yu Xiao thinks it's possible, I will not refuse. Xiao Lingyun cast his gaze to the seat, bowed and said, fellow Taoist Kongzheng, if I don't take this opportunity to kill this person, I will suffer even more losses. Jinren Kongzheng, on the other hand, was silent. If the mystic technique was used, there would be no deterrence and they would enter the chaotic battle of the various sects in advance. At this moment, he suddenly felt the qi dynamic on his body sink and his heart sink. He could not help but be slightly surprised. Looking at this situation, it was not as simple as his side's fate energy being affected, it was even showing signs of falling. He immediately thought that this was not only because Chu Rui was killed, but also because the people's hearts were wavering. Everyone present could also sense this change. Enlightened Master Bai Bai pondered for a moment, stood up and bowed, saying, Senior brother, the 4 enlightened masters who went with Sect Master Chu are still outside. If Zhang Yan goes back to kill them, it will not be easy to bring them back. I hope senior brother will think twice. Shang Shooting also said, fellow Taoist Kongzheng, Sect Master Chu is already dead. If we don't deal with this person in a thunderous manner, I'm afraid the people's hearts will not be at ease. Jinren Kongzheng nodded. He had also made up his mind that this could not go on. Even if the mystic technique might fail, he could at least bring the 4 people back and avoid further damage. He turned his head and said, Sect Master Tan, please make your move. Tan Dingxian bowed and said, everyone, please wait a moment. He turned around and bowed a few times to the sky. He then took out a long incense from his sleeve and blew it with a breath of clear air. The incense burned by itself and turned into a green smoke that floated into the sky. Not long after, the huge star stone that was originally hanging outside the heavens sensed something and suddenly trembled. Then, it suddenly fell, bringing with it a scarlet flame and rumbled towards the 9 continents. In an instant, it broke through several layers of strong clouds in the atmosphere. Finally, there was a loud noise that sounded like the sky was being split open. The stone suddenly cracked and turned into countless faintly discernible colorless flames that were like mist and qi that scattered outwards. At this moment, everyone who saw the flames felt an inexplicable palpitation in their hearts. Tan Dingxian said, this flame is called the Heart Origin Tribulation Fire. It was formed from the blood of several ancestors in the West Continent. It was refined in the heart furnace for 1,000 years. No matter where you come from, if your cultivation base has not reached the stage of breaking through the boundary, you will immediately turn into a pile of flying ashes if you come into contact with this flame. Wu Fenggu asked, Sect Master Tan, with my composure, why do I feel a sense of fear when I look at it? Tan Dingxian said, there's a reason for this. This flame exists in between form and form. It is connected to a person's divine will. Even if you look at it for a long time, it can enter a person's heart and burn their essence, primordial spirit, and spirit. Once it has identified the person's chi, it will be useless no matter if you hide in a small world or a mountain gate. If Zhang Yan dares to destroy the continent at this moment, he will be burned to death by this flame the moment he thinks about it. Everyone was shocked when they heard this. They dared not look at it anymore and did not dare to have any rash thoughts. When Tan Dingxian saw everyone's expression, he quickly said, "Don't be afraid, everyone. I'm a person who holds the law. This flame will only go after the enemy, it will definitely not hurt anyone." He turned his head to look at the scattered fireballs that were falling from the sky. He sighed and said, "This method is more than enough to attack dozens of people, but it's a bit of a waste to use it against one person." Just as he finished speaking, he saw that the fireballs that were still in midair actually stopped in unison. Then, as if they were being guided, they all flew in the same direction. The fireballs also became larger and larger, and it seemed like they were about to converge into one. Xinren Kangzheng's body trembled. He stood up and said, "It's the Venerable One." Right at this moment, a mighty Milky Way rushed out from the dark azure Sex mountain gate, sweeping over. With just a wave, it instantly engulfed most of the fire. Almost at the same time, a sword light flew out from the Shaoqing mountain gate and landed on the flame. It actually cut off the remaining 90% in one go. However, some of it still fell. Looking at its direction, it was coming for Zhang Yan. When Xinren Kangzheng saw this, he said coldly, "Shaoqing, Qinsang. It's clear this time." The moment the flame appeared, Zhang Yan sensed great danger. How could he not guess that the other party used mystic techniques? He looked at the sky and quickly determined that even though the flame was cut off again and again, its power was still far beyond what a person could handle. The talisman that sect leader Qin gave him previously might not be able to block it. At this point, he could only rely on himself to save himself. Fortunately, the flame did not fly very fast, so there was still a chance. His thoughts raced, and he immediately came up with an idea. He summoned the Qinghong sword pill from afar and combined with him. They immediately turned into a sword rainbow and fled to the west. Xiao Lingyun frowned and asked, "This person is not going north, but to the west. Is he asking for Shaoqing's help?" Tan Dingxian said coldly, "That's for the best. This flame will not extinguish until it catches up to this person. Even if someone reaches out to help, even if they are thousands of miles away, they will still be affected and fall into the tribulation fire. I'm not afraid of Shaoqing's help, but I'm afraid that he won't." At this moment, Zhang Yan crossed the continent and quickly left the East Flower continent, heading straight for the West Sea. Then, he leaped and fell into the sea. As soon as he entered the sea, the flame followed him and entered the sea. Those who knew would be able to recognize that the direction he was heading to was the sea eye that suppressed the sun-swallowing green locust. Chapter 1180. After Zhang Yan dove into the ocean, he used the dragon's soul essence to split the waves and dive down. However, the tribulation flame seemed to be special. At the start, it was slow, but as time went on, it became faster and faster, slowly catching up. Thus, he had no choice but to use his movement technique. His body was like a streak of light, and in just a few hours, he arrived at the eye of the ocean. What he saw was the foot of mysterious water that filled up the area. His body shook and he used the water movement technique. In an instant, he passed through the water and entered where the mountain and mountain seal was. After he stabilized his body, he shook his sleeves and a cloud of smoke passed. 100 feet tall 6-story pavilion appeared and he tossed the demon treasury out. His strength path techniques were learned from this demon treasury. After he formed his grotto heaven, he used many methods to attack this item, but he couldn't damage it at all. He guessed that this item came from beyond the sky. If it could even fly through the void, then it might be able to block the tribulation flame. However, he didn't know what the origin of this item was and he didn't want to expose it in front of others. This place was blocked by the foot of mysterious water. This water was used to suppress the eye of the ocean and also to cover the eyes and ears of people who wanted to. Even an ascended Jinren wouldn't be able to discern what was going on within. If he took out the demon treasury here, he wouldn't be afraid of people seeing it. He called out in his heart and the two stone doors opened. He looked back and saw the tribulation fire pass through the foot of mysterious water without a sound. It was chasing after him, but as he looked over, the fire seemed to want to enter his heart. He laughed coldly and jumped into the demon treasury. The door behind him slammed shut. The tribulation flame fell down, but it followed. This flame was between form and formless. Logically speaking, even the mountain gate formation wouldn't be able to block it. However, when it smashed into the demon treasury, it was actually blocked. It tried to charge forward a few times, but it couldn't get over. In the end, it could only circle around the building. Zhang Yan saw that the flame couldn't enter and calmed down. He came to the 5th floor and sat down. Although he was able to avoid the attack of the tribulation flame, he temporarily couldn't go out. He didn't know how long this fire could last, but it would be difficult for him to do anything before the fire was extinguished. However, just now, after the battle, his spiritual power had been consumed quite a lot. It was a good opportunity for him to recover a little. So, he took out a medicinal pill from his sleeve and swallowed it. Then, he meditated and adjusted his breathing. Xiao Lingyun watched him dive into the sea. He didn't come out for a long time, but he didn't know what was happening below, so he asked, Sect Master Tan, in your opinion, can this person escape the fire? Tan Dingxian hesitated for a moment before she said, unless Zhang Yan breaks through the void and escapes right now, he won't be able to escape the fire. Even if you come down, you won't be able to show your face. You're no longer a threat to me. Palace Master Bai Bai interrupted, what if the two sect masters lend a helping hand? Tan Dingxian thought for a while. He replied, this fire is the heart fire. Whoever is helping out will have to bear the brunt of it. If the sect leaders of the two sects could resolve it together, they would have done so long ago. Right now, they are both resolving the fire calamity. If they were to make a move again, I'm afraid these two will also suffer from the burning disaster. Xiao Lingyun unconsciously nodded and praised, the methods of the ancestors are indeed impressive. Tan Dingxian said, we only need to wait for Zhang Yan to die. My fate will be able to overshadow the other side. Jinren Kongjing shook his head and said, we can't pin our hopes on this. Although Zhang Yan is gone, Qinsang School's strength still exists. Without the threat of the fire calamity in the sky, this generation has less scruples. In order to save the situation, it is very likely that they will go out to fight. I'm afraid the battle will be even more intense later. Everyone, please be careful. Everyone's expression was slightly stern. They thought that what Jinren Kongjing said was very reasonable. Just now, with Chu Rui's death, the fate of both sides had become almost equal. The advantage that they had accumulated previously was gone. If Zhang Yan died, Qinsang School would definitely lose a few more points. In order to break the situation, it was very likely that they would take the initiative to attack. However, if it was not dead, it was very likely that it would not move. Shang Shooting said solemnly, what Qinsang School will do next will depend on Zhang Yan's life. Tan Dingxian said with certainty, this person will definitely die. Xiao Lingyun glanced at the divine beast egg that had fallen into the sea and snorted, we'll know in a day or two. At this moment, 30,000 feet underground, Liang Xuani sat above the river Styx and looked towards the horizon. In the past, he could see a stone hanging in the sky, but now, there was no trace of it. He said slowly, the star stone has cracked, and the blade hanging above has disappeared. It's time for us to make a move. Although he had agreed with Lord Lingye to deal with Qinsang and Shaoqing sects together, it did not mean that they would not be on guard against each other. He also knew that the profound technique on the star stone was especially powerful. If Yu Xia also had the intention to eliminate the 6 sects, he would be able to use it during the intense battle, and all his enemies would be wiped out in one fell swoop. But now, there was no need to worry about this anymore. His mind sank, and he disappeared like smoke. When he appeared again, he was already inside a vast cave abode that had no end. There was a stone tablet the size of a mountain standing here, and there were 5 people sitting outside the tablet. They were the leaders of the other 5 sects of the demonic sect. Seeing his arrival, they hurriedly stood up and cupped their fists together, saying, "Greetings, sect leader Liang." Liang Xuanyi nodded slightly and looked at the Origin Mirage sect leader Xue Dingyuan, asking, "Sect leader Xue, how's the setup?" Xue Dingyuan bowed and said, "Everything is ready. We only need sect leader Liang to activate the profound technique. Originally, we were going to carry out this plan, but if it drags on for too long, we need to extract spiritual vigor from the various spiritual points to make up for it. But now that the last spiritual point has appeared, we can borrow it. This is really the help of the heavens." Liang Xuanyi said in a deep voice, "If we don't do it, even if we get help from the heavens, it will be useless. Our spirit gate has been suppressed by the Taoists for nearly 10,000 years. Now that the Taoists are in internal chaos, we can borrow the great calamity to rise up and attack the other generation to change our fate." Hearing that, the leaders of the various sects naturally agreed in unison. Xue Dingyuan cupped his fists and said, "May I know where we're going to attack?" Liang Xuanyi said, "Qinsang school is restrained by Yuxiao, so there's no need to pay attention to it. Shaoqing sect is in a friendly alliance with them, so I should be the one to cut it off." Xue Dingyuan already had a plan in mind, so he bowed and stood in front of the tablet. This was his Origin Mirage sect's treasure, the great spiritual tablet of mental imagery. With this tablet as the foundation, it could draw out a profound technique called false spirit reflecting reality. Once this technique was activated, the qi of the Origin Mirage qi would immediately cover the heavens and earth, and it could reflect the many people that appeared in the great spiritual tablet into the world. Moreover, it could be driven by one side to attack and annihilate the enemy. As long as the spiritual opportunity was not exhausted, this technique could be maintained. There was a saying that went, "The falling flowers in the well illuminate the ruined face, the shaking shadow does not move the entire realm. The river flew and chased after the moon. Changing the scenery only depended on one's heart." The combined forces of the 6 demonic sects had already greatly suppressed Shaoqing sect on the surface, but if they wanted to destroy this sect, they would definitely have to pay a huge price. Even if they won, it would be difficult for them to win against the Xian sect in the future. However, with this technique, it was different. The cultivators of the 6 sects did not have to personally go into battle. As long as they had enough spiritual opportunity, they could continuously command the mental illusions to attack. Liang Xuanyi shook his sleeves. A thick yellow smoke poured into the tablet, and as he cast the technique, the entire tablet started to buzz and tremble. Seeing that, the 4 sect leaders of the Blood Spirit sect, 9 Spirits sect, Hunching sect, and Bone Shadow sect also cast a technique into it at the same time. The originally dark surface of the great spiritual tablet suddenly became clear and bright, and one could vaguely see many figures standing within it. Their original faces were a little blurry. However, as time passed, they gradually became clearer. Xue Dingyuan saw that he had achieved his goal. He chanted the spell in his heart and used his spiritual power to guide it. In an instant, there was a loud sound as if the world was shaking. Surging mirage energy erupted from the great spiritual steel. Then, a dozen or so figures rode on the clouds and flew in the direction of the Shaoqing sect. The sect leader of the Jiling sect, Fei Yu, observed for a moment before saying, "These illusory figures are able to cast mystic arts, yet they don't have any magical treasures on them. I wonder how long they can hold out against the Shaoqing sect." Xue Dingyuan said with a smile, "Although we don't know the exact number of Shaoqing sect's heavenly abode cultivators, there are many of them. However, if it doesn't exceed 9, then even if he can kill it, he will definitely lose his essence qi and magic power. We can still take a peek at his divine abilities and methods. The next time we really fight him, we can be on guard." The Blood Soul sect's sect master, Fang Shuntong, said coldly, "After exterminating Shaoqing, Qinsang school will not be able to do anything alone." Everyone nodded in agreement. As for whether attacking Shaoqing would damage the continent, they did not consider it. Naturally, Venerable Lingya would protect them. As expected, not long after those illusory figures flew out, a spiritual light shot out from the Scarlet Jade Cliff. In an instant, the entire East Flower continent was illuminated within it. At this moment, the great spiritual steel shook again, and another dozen or so people flew out from it. At this moment, the expressions of those who flew out were no different from real people. The sect leaders could recognize people they were familiar with, and there were even cultivators from their own sections. Fei Yu said, "Are there only cultivators from my spirit sect here?" Shui Dingyuan replied, "Of course not. I have also summoned many powerful figures from the mystic sect. For example, that Qinsang School's Yan Changsheng is also among them. Even if he doesn't have any magical treasures on him, his battle prowess is not to be underestimated." Fei Yu sighed and said, "It's a pity that this qi has evolved into people below the nascent embryo stage. Otherwise, it would bring even more trouble to the Shaoqing sect." Shui Dingyuan smiled deeply and said, "That might not be the case." With a rumble, the great spiritual steel shook again. Everyone turned their heads to look. This time, there were many people who came out, unlike the previous 2 times. There was actually only one person, and he did not fly away immediately. Instead, he slowly walked out from inside. He had a dignified appearance and wore a black robe. Profound qi revolved around his body. Just by standing there, he had a shocking might. Zhang Yan. Other than Liang Xuani, the other sect leaders were shocked when they saw him. They all stood up and could not help but want to attack. Shui Dingyuan smiled and said, "Everyone, don't be alarmed. This is an illusory figure formed from the spirit steel. I will use such a person to attack Shaoqing. Let's see how they deal with it." Everyone looked at each other and nodded subconsciously. Just now, the scene of Zhang Yan fighting and killing Chu Rui was naturally seen by them. Even Yan Changsheng had lost his life in the hands of this person. He could be said to be extremely ferocious. Although he had not refined the nascent embryo and was only a mental image incarnation, he should be able to bring Shaoqing quite a bit of trouble. Shui Dingyuan took out a hand seal and wanted to command it. However, after he gave the order, the illusory figure of Zhang Yan stood there without moving. He could not help but be shocked. The illusory figure looked at everyone coldly. With a leap, it soared into the sky and leaped to the west. Chapter 1181. The sect masters of the Devil's sect were suspicious when they saw Zhang Yan's illusion flying away. Fei Yu asked, "Sect Master Shui, did something happen?" Shui Dingyuan thought for a while, then bowed to Liang Xuani and asked, "Sect Master Liang, this place, although the mystic technique was entrusted to the mystic clam sect's treasure, the person who executed it was Liang Xuani. Even if there were changes in it, it was difficult for him to know what was going on." Liang Xuani remained silent at first. He seemed to have probed for a while before saying, "I already know the whole story. This person should have a mysterious secret technique, which is why his illusion is different from ours. If we use it to attack, we will need to use more essence qi and mana. This is not worth it, so there's no need to restrain it anymore. Furthermore, it is formed by the spirit tablet, so it won't take the initiative to become my enemy if we don't provoke it. Sect masters, don't worry." Fei Yu frowned and said, "If we can't use it, won't we waste our spiritual opportunity for nothing?" Liang Xuani said plainly, "I know about this, but the Shaoqing sect doesn't. Furthermore, it is restrained by the spirit tablet and is still in my formation. How can the person on the other side really ignore it? If we use it well, it can still help me." Qinghang Palace, Sun Piercer Great Mountain Dun. The Shaoqing sect master, Yu Xianshao, stood in the hall. Below him were the 8 enlightened masters. According to seniority, the people standing at the top were Chuanxiu, Xuan, Yu Shirong, Feng Xianzhao, and Chao Shao. Below them were Ran Xiushu, Qing Chenzi, and Sun Huaying, the 3 juniors who had achieved the Grotto Heaven within 1,000 years. The 3 of them learned different sword techniques. Each of the 3 lineages had a branch, so they stood in different positions. The Devil's sect did not hide anything, so the Shaoqing sect naturally noticed it immediately. However, no one in the hall had any change in expression. They all looked indifferent. Xuan smiled and said, the devil sect has some guts to attack us like this. This time, we can kill to our heart's content. Ing Chuanqiu took a few glances. With his mana, he could naturally tell that these people were formed by spiritual opportunity and essence qi. He said, the ones coming are illusions. To be able to come out so much, this disciple guessed that it was because of the profound technique, probably because he wanted to use it to exhaust my essence qi and mana. Xuan said indifferently, it doesn't matter if it's an illusion or a real body. We will kill whoever comes. After a pause, he said to Reverend Luo, what does Reverend Luo think? Yu Shirong looked up and said seriously, sure. Ing Chuanqiu shook his head. At this moment, a whistling sound suddenly came from outside the hall. Everyone looked towards the source of the sound and saw a spiritual light penetrating into the hall. Ing Chuanqiu raised his hand. He flipped it open and took a look. Then he bowed to the hall and said, Shizuan, sect leader Qin has sent a letter asking if the devil sect needs Qinsang school's help when they attack. Yu Xianshao thought for a moment and said, it's just that the 6 sects of the demonic Tao are more than enough to deal with them. Send a letter back saying that I thank sect master Qin for his good intentions. We only need to trouble him to restrain Lingya. Ing Chuanqiu agreed. Yu Xianshao said, if it's only the Shaoqing sect in this battle, I don't mind fighting with these illusions. However, this time, we're not fighting for victory. We still need to consider the safety of our alliance, so we can't act rashly. Reverends, please bear this in mind. The Shaoqing sect members bowed and agreed. Yu Xianshao looked up and said indifferently, if they have profound techniques, do you think I don't? He waved his hand, and a ray of light that was as bright as a silver star flew out and reached the top of the mountain. Very quickly, it turned into millions of spots of light and merged with the surrounding heaven and earth. This technique was called Absolute Joy of Heaven's Heart. After it was used, every ray of sword light could turn into a black hole in the void. If a cultivator came over and jumped around, as long as he bumped into the place where the sword light was, he would trigger the killing intent and be killed by the sword. This was not an illusion, but a cultivator from the Devil's Sect's Grotto Heaven. Under such a profound technique, he would also be unable to resist. This was because the black hole would change once every 10 breaths. Even if one didn't move or turn, as long as they were within the range of this technique, they wouldn't be able to stand still. The only way to avoid it was to retreat far away. At this moment, the dozen or so illusions that came out from the Devil's Sect had already arrived in front of the Shaoqing sect. As soon as they arrived, a few of them spread out their dharma and surrounded the sun-piercing mountain. For a moment, there was no longer any light in the sky. There were only hazy clouds, bloody fog, and chilly winds that howled and raged, covering the entire world. It looked like it would be able to drown the Shaoqing sect's mountain in one fell swoop. However, such a scene could only be seen in the Donghua continent. Outside the shroud of Yuanying Qi, the sky was clear and bright, and there was no movement at all. It was as if it had turned into 2 different worlds. Among the many illusions, a yellow-robed Taoist appeared. If anyone recognized him, they would recognize that he was an elder of the Nether Spring sect who had passed away a long time ago. He sneered and said, Perfected ones, if Shaoqing cowers and no one comes out to fight me, I'll attack his mountain. Let's see if he agrees or not. However, not long after he said that, his expression suddenly changed, as if he had encountered something terrifying. In the next moment, he disappeared without a sound, as if he had never appeared in this world. This was because he had accidentally touched a black hole in the void, causing all his spiritual vigor and essence to be instantly taken away. These illusions received the methods of the various sect leaders and were not much different from real people. They also had their own intelligence. Seeing such a scene, they immediately knew that they had fallen into Shaoqing's trap. The few people from before immediately wanted to retract their dharma, but it was already too late. One by one, they followed in the footsteps of that person. Liang Xuani looked at this scene coldly. He had already expected this. In his previous speculations, if Shaoqing sect used Xian techniques to stop them, then it would be impossible for all the illusions to reach Shaoqing sect's mountain. It was already not bad for 10 to 20% of them to stay. However, he had the last spirit cave as his backing. As long as the spiritual vigor was continuous, he could continuously send out illusions. However, he did not believe that Shaoqing's Xian techniques could continue to resist him like this. Sooner or later, there would be a moment of exhaustion. At that time, he would either use another Xian technique to resolve the crisis, or he could only choose to fight. Otherwise, the mountain would definitely be surrounded by them. At this moment, the illusions in the sky disappeared one after another. Very soon, there was only one person left. His figure was constantly changing, but he was actually not killed by the Xian techniques. Instead, he was continuously approaching Shaoqing sect's main gate. Xuan took a look and instantly became interested. He said, "It's Qinsang School's Jinren Yan. I didn't expect the Devil's Sect to also have such a person." Ying Chuanqiu said in a deep voice, "Jinren Yan has long cultivated one of the 5 techniques and 3 scriptures of Qinsang School, the Yuanqian spiritual cave scripture, to a high level. If this illusions can copy all of his methods and abilities, then they might be able to detect some changes in the qi dynamic in advance. No wonder they can survive for so long." Elder Shui turned around and said, "Sect leader. Can I meet him for a while?" Yu Xianxiao thought for a while. If it was only one person fighting, it would not be a problem. He could also use this to test if the Devil's Sect had any hidden trump cards. He nodded and only reminded, "Elder Shui, don't be greedy for battle." Elder Shui laughed and said that he understood. Then, he turned into a light and flew away. Before his voice faded away, he had actually arrived before Yan Changsheng's illusions, and he slashed down with his sword. The extreme sword was swift like a bolt of lightning. Logically speaking, if Elder Shui didn't possess a suitable magic artifact in his possession, then there would surely be no chance for him to survive this strike. However, the phantom seemed to have known of this change in advance, and with a wave of its hand, it executed the space divide technique, causing the tip of Elder Shui's sword to instantly descend into empty air. Before he could raise his sword again, the illusions pointed at him and instantly cut off all his senses of the qi dynamic. His opponent was clearly still within his field of vision, but he just had a feeling that his opponent was illusory and indeterminate. Not only was Elder Shui not shocked, he became even more interested and thought to himself, "Interesting. Even if Jinren Yan is really here, I'm afraid he can only deal with it like this when my sword approaches him. Unfortunately, you don't have any magic tools in your possession. Even if I don't use my divine abilities, how many strikes can you take from me?" With a turn of his body, a ray of sword light had already leaped out. However, before the sword shadow in front of him disappeared, a ray of sword light had already shot out from the back of Yan Changsheng's illusions, and instantly pierced through his body. However, the illusions split up, and actually took the initiative to disperse his spiritual vigor before the sword light reached his body. He leaped in all directions, and actually managed to avoid another strike. Moreover, because his spiritual vigor had been cut off, Elder Shui was unable to determine where the real body was. It was obvious that he had already predicted the subsequent changes before this move, and thus made such a response. However, Elder Shui did not chase after him. Instead, he retracted his sword, and instantly revealed a look of pity. He did not chase after him anymore. Although his opponent had dodged his sword strike, his actions would not be able to avoid the void Xian hole that existed everywhere around him. As expected, the countless spiritual vigor that dispersed did not go far, as if it had collided with some invisible force, and was forcibly erased from the sky, never to gather again. Elder Shui shook his head. In actual fact, just now, he had lost a move. If there was no Xian Shu above his head, perhaps he could have fought to his heart's content. He flicked his sleeves, and just as he was about to escape back to the mountain gate, he glanced around and stopped. There were more than 10 rays of light coming over from afar. However, after taking a closer look, his eyebrows raised, and he said in surprise, isn't that spiritual master Zhang of Qinsang School? I didn't expect his illusions to be among them. Should I go up and have a fight with him?" Under the West Ci, After Zhang Yan meditated for a few hours, his mana had already recovered. Although he was sitting in the demonic treasury, his cultivation had already broken through to the 7th gate. With a move of his spirit, he could see the mountains and rivers of the 9 continents. Although this move consumed a little of his mana, he did not need to fight with anyone now, so there was no need to deliberately recuperate. After a brief investigation, he saw more than 10 rays of light flying towards the direction of the Shaoqing sect's mountain gate. After looking for a moment, he could not help but raise his eyebrows, and realized that his own family was actually among them. So it's just an illusion. He pondered for a moment, looked at the tribulation fire that lingered outside, and had an idea in his heart. He thought to himself, I can give it a try. Even if it doesn't work, I won't lose anything. He pointed at the center of his eyebrows, and with a flash of spiritual light, he took out the demon-subduing slip. Then, he threw it out, and it turned into a brilliant rainbow light, passing through the demonic treasury without any obstruction, all the way to the direction of Diyudan. Chapter 1182. The demon-subduing talisman had a bit of Zhang Yan's soul attached to it, so he could control it as he wished. After exiting the eye of the ocean, it turned into a thin wisp of smoke, flying towards the Shaoqing sect mountain gate. Very quickly, it entered the area covered by the essence soul energy. When he entered, the sky darkened, the scenery around was blurry. The clouds in the sky were like blood and smoke that were glued together, it was extremely dirty and turbid. He didn't bother about it, just flying towards the sun-piercing mountain mound. After a long while, he saw a sword light moving about in front of him, like it was fighting with a few illusionary images. Right at this moment, there was a sudden flash of light. It was the sword light that had slashed one of the phantoms. Along with a thunderous explosion that rumbled incessantly, the phantoms instantly exploded, and in the end, they transformed into a large mass of roiling turbid gas. Zhang Yan knew quite a bit of the Shaoqing sect's divine arts, and recognized that this art was the divine art of the extreme sword lineage, extreme yang thunder shock. When the sword rose, it was as swift as light, and in an instant, thousands of sword lights shot out, to the point that when the sound merged together, it was like a thunderclap. Just now, the illusionary image was killed by the sword light, so it wasn't swallowed by the void hole. Naturally, there was still some energy left here. The demon-subduing slip naturally loved to devour essence, primordial energy, and souls. This was especially so since this illusion had the help of the heads of the 6 sections. The 3 treasures were all present, making it even more attractive to the slip. It circled around outside and continuously devoured the spiritual opportunity. When Zhang Yan saw that, he was deep in thought, but he didn't stop it. The demon-subduing talisman's outer appearance was like smoke, so even if the scattered energy was snatched away, no one would notice. At the same time, his illusionary image was driven by the Xian technique. At this moment, he arrived in front of the mountain gate. However, if he could sense that something was wrong, before he reached the area covered by the Xian technique of Shaoqing, he would stand still and not move. He didn't advance. At this moment, the second batch of illusionary images were still fighting with Elder Shui, so naturally no one bothered about him. After standing there quietly for an hour, the 4th batch of illusionary images arrived. Even though they had intelligence, because they were under orders, most of them were indifferent to others. Therefore, most of them turned a blind eye to him. They brushed past one by one, except for one. However, he stopped and asked with a gloomy expression, "Why don't you attack the mountain together?" The reason why the 6 sects of the Fiend sect summoned so many phantoms was to protect the reputation of the various sects. The people chosen were mostly elders in the sect, and there were no sect masters. Even because they were allied with Yuxiao school, there were no people from other sections. However, this person's tone and expression seemed to indicate that his status was not low. Zhang Yan's illusory image glanced at him, then raised its hand and slapped the ground. A rumbling sound rang out. In an instant, the void collapsed, and the other party was shaken into a ball of spiritual vigor. Then, he waved his sleeve. He swung it away. When the demon-subduing slip saw that, it flashed and swallowed the spiritual energy. After doing that, it circled around the Zhang Yan illusion and suddenly flashed. Then, it darted toward the center of his brows. The illusory image's brow rose up and he pushed with his hand. A streak of mysterious energy surged over and blocked the demon's subduing slip outside. However, at that moment, he seemed to have sensed something. He turned around and saw a sword light charging in from afar, heading right for his face. However, he didn't dodge and just looked on coldly. Elder Shui's sword slashed over and he wanted to succeed. However, when the sword light slashed down, it brushed past the body of the illusory image like it was slashing into nothingness. It didn't touch anything and just passed through it. He was startled. Could it really be an illusion? Just as he was thinking about it, he had slashed out dozens of times. However, each time it slashed at where the illusory image stood, it passed through its body. At this moment, he noticed that something was wrong and understood that this should be the ability of Zhang Yan's body. Now, the illusory image was using it too. Although he didn't understand the profoundness behind it, he didn't have any fear in his heart. Instead, his eyes lit up and he was about to leap up and slash again. However, the illusory image grabbed onto him and his body froze, as though it was about to lean forward. The extreme sword sect focused on flying horizontally and vertically. They didn't have any worries and didn't have any heart to fight with others. They focused on moving around and searching for opportunities. In an instant, they would be thousands of miles away and in the next, they would be within 3 feet of the enemy. Originally, if not for the Xian technique grabbing onto him, Elder Shui would have been able to use his teleportation ability to jump out of the battle circle. However, it wasn't possible, so he didn't retreat and instead advanced. With a loud shout, he transformed into thousands of sword lights and slashed forward. The illusory image still didn't move, but a glass-like chi cover suddenly appeared on its body. When the sword light fell into it, it seemed to have entered an endless distance, unable to get close to him at all. Elder Shui originally had the intention to attack in place of defense. Seeing this scene, he immediately turned his sword and wanted to fly out, but he heard a muffled thunderous roar behind him. The sword light trembled and he couldn't help but pause for a moment. At the same time, just now, he felt a pulling force on him. At the same time, the chi cover suddenly expanded, as though it wanted to trap him inside. Elder Shui secretly cursed in his heart. He had long known that this Hall Master Du Jin was not easy to deal with, but he didn't think that an illusory image would be so powerful. At the same time, he felt depressed. Many of the abilities of the extreme sword lineage relied on teleportation. Now that he was restrained, he might not care about it if he fought with ordinary people, but if he fought with an expert, this difference was very fatal. When Zhang Yan saw this, he knew that his chance had come. This mysterious revolving heaven net wall was deduced by him, so he naturally knew all the changes within it. Thus, with a push of his heart, the demon subduing slip suddenly turned into a crystal light and rushed inside. Then, with a turn, it actually jumped over the barrier and went straight into the illusory image's eyebrows. He had once thought that these illusory images could even use the original owner's Dao techniques, so it couldn't be obtained out of thin air. At the very least, it should have borrowed his own chi. Then, there might be a connection between them. Therefore, in his plan, he wanted to send the demon subduing slip into his own illusory image and then find a way to make it his own through the soul hidden within it. However, this was also because he wanted to avoid the tribulation fire and temporarily couldn't interfere in the battle. Just now doing this, he couldn't be sure whether or not it would succeed, so he just wanted to give it a try. Once the demon subduing slip entered the illusory image's body, it immediately found an incomparably dark and dirty spirit. Without hesitation, it went forward and swallowed it. However, when it was about to use its soul to take over the illusory image, it slowly dissipated like fog. When Zhang Yan saw this, he didn't show any expression of disappointment. He thought to himself, the people of the Devil's sect are indeed experts in the way of the soul. As expected, there are no loopholes to exploit. The tribulation fire still hasn't dissipated. If I want to get out of here soon, it seems like I have to think of another way. At this time, outside, Elder Shui had gathered all his mana and was about to fight with his life on the line. However, suddenly the illusory image in front of him collapsed. He couldn't help but be startled. After a while, he saw a thin mist flying out. He guessed that there was a fellow Taoist helping him, but he didn't know who it was. After thinking for a while, he took out his sword and leaped back to the mountain gate. While the battle was fierce here, on the other side, Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying had returned to the mountain gate via the sea. If it wasn't for the tribulation fire, they might not have been able to escape from Zhang Yan's hands. Therefore, they were secretly relieved. When they came to the hall, they reported back to the banquet and sat down. Not long after he sat down, he heard the hall master of Bai Bai Temple say, "The spiritual gate just sent a letter, inviting me to think of a way to restrain the Yutsang sect to prevent them from being attacked from both front and back, or even fall short of success. I wonder what Senior Marshal Brothers' decision is." Taihao sect master Shang Shooting scoffed and said, "Although the 6 sects of the spiritual sect have made their move, they are attacking with illusory images now. Shaoqing has also taken out their profound technique. The two sides might not be able to determine the victor even if they fight for days and nights. Isn't it a little too early for me to make a move now?" Everyone agreed. Although the 6 sects of the spiritual sect had made their move, the Shaoqing sect had the mountain gate formation to rely on, so the outcome could not be seen for a while. However, looking at the current battle situation, there was indeed a need to delay. Tan Dingxian said, "I think this is the right time, it's not appropriate to wait any longer. Everyone, you should understand that previously, the Qinsang school did not dare to make too much of a commotion when it absorbed the earth qi because it was afraid that the fellow Taoists in the world would notice. However, it's different now. They must have unleashed it. If the earth qi is damaged too much, even if we defeat the Qinsang school after this, the Donghua continent will also lose its spiritual opportunity. It will no longer be a place for us cultivators to live. Therefore, it's better to make a move as soon as possible." Xiao Lingyun sneered, "Sect Master Tan, you're wrong. Although the Qinsang school is my archenemy, the spiritual sect has to guard against it as well. Especially since the 6 sects seem to be fighting fiercely, but in reality, they have not suffered any damage. How can I make a move so easily?" As soon as she said that, many people agreed with her. Although the 6 sects of the spiritual sect were on guard against Yuxiao, Yuxiao's side was also on guard. Especially Nanhua Taihao, Yuan Yang, and the other sects, they knew that once they started fighting, they would definitely be the ones to charge at the front. Since they had the shifting feather technique to determine fate energy, why would they fight to the death? At the moment, the 6 demonic sects were obviously suppressing Shaoqing. When Shaoqing lost a few people, they would naturally have a chance to win. Sage Su Heng thought for a while and said, "After all, we've already made an agreement. It's not appropriate to sit back and watch. Why don't we make a compromise?" Jinren Kongjing asked, "What do you think, Hall Master Su Heng?" Sage Su Heng smiled and said, "Since he wants me to go north, then I'll go north and build up the momentum. However, we'll decide when to make a move. When we're outside the Great Pool of Dragon Lake, we'll surround them but not attack. This will also restrain the Qinsang school, and the 6 sects of the spiritual sect won't be able to say anything about it. What do you think, Sage?" Xiao Lingyun's face lit up and said, "Daoist Kongzheng, this plan is feasible." Shang Shooting also nodded and said, "When we're outside the Qinsang school's mountain gate, even if something unexpected happens, we can immediately attack the mountain." Tan Dingxian cupped his hands and said, "My Butian Pavilion's mountain gate is already near the Mo Chiu cliff. If Sage wants to go north, why don't you come to my mountain gate? This way, your journey will be safe." Jinren Kongjin glanced over and saw that the Shao and Shang sects masters were looking at him. How could he not know what they were thinking? After he, Yuxiao, led the various sects to the front, the mountain gates of Nanhua Taihao, Yuan Yang, and the other sects would naturally be behind them. However, at the same time, it would be much easier to command the 3 sections. After thinking about it, he felt that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages, so he slowly stood up from his seat and said in a deep voice, "I'll inform Peak Master Ming that Hall Master Xian Ming has just returned from outside the mountain. His mana has not recovered, so he'll stay here to guard the mountain gate. The rest of you, follow me north to attack Qinsong." To be continued. Chapter 1183. After deciding on the grand plan, Jinren Kongzheng and the spiritual masters of the various sects rushed out of the hall. Standing on the cliff, they gazed into the distant sky. Outside of the Mo Chiyu cliff, a boundless green cloud gradually drifted over. Its speed seemed slow, but it was actually fast, faster than a flying swan. If one looked carefully, one could clearly see that it was an incomparably enormous green leaf that could practically be carried. On this large leaf, there were mountain ranges, rivers, cliffs, and palaces. Under the bright sun, golden light illuminated the sky, brilliant and splendid. It was extraordinary. In the center, there was a towering watchtower. Its eaves were pointed, and its aura was arrogant. Above it, there was clear air rising, as if it was in harmony with the heavens. Tan Dingxian said, "Fellow cultivators, my heaven-mending pavilion's mountain formation has arrived. This time, we will go on a punitive expedition against Qinsong. With this protection, we won't be ambushed along the way." Heaven-mending pavilion's mountain gate was refined from a formation diagram, and its defensive ability was comparable to the great formations of the various sections. Rumor has it that it could even fly around and enter the darkness. Originally, no one dared to look down on it. However, because the 9 continents absorbed too much spiritual energy and almost fell to the ground, the various sects couldn't help but look down on it. Many people even thought that it was just an exaggeration. Xiao Lingyun looked left and right, and said, "Sect Master Tan, I have something to ask. The restriction of your sect's mountain gate is only supported by fellow cultivator Tai Hao's large leaf, but if this leaf is damaged and the mountain gate falls, what should we do?" Tan Dingxian said, "Everyone, don't worry. Although my heaven-mending mountain gate relies on the help of fellow cultivator Tai Hao school to survive, that is because we scrupulously abide by the sect's rules and did not dare to use underhanded methods. Now, there are no such obstructions. Heaven Mending Pavilion was established by the joint efforts of several powerful cultivators over 10,000 years. It was to prevent future generations from repeating the same mistakes and causing the world to change. Many powerful methods were left behind, but in order to prevent future generations from using them for personal gain, many rules and restrictions were also set. For example, when the sect masters of each generation inherited their position, they all had to swear an oath in front of the ancestral tablets. If the energy of the earth did not move, then the formation diagram would not move. Therefore, only ordinary restrictions were used to guard the mountain gate. However, the might of the formation had never been displayed since the founding of the sect. Jinren Kongzheng was obviously aware of the inside story. Otherwise, he would not have agreed with Tan Dingxian's suggestion. He said, "On this expedition to Qinsong, we may encounter obstacles along the way. Without the help of fellow Heaven Mending Pavilion's formation diagram, I'm afraid it would be difficult to reach that place. Not only would the journey be smooth sailing if one were to use this formation to advance, as long as one arrived before the Great Dragon Lake, it would be equivalent to reaching the throat of the Great Dragon Lake. It could reduce the advantage of the mountain guarding formation to the minimum." Tan Dingxian said, "Fellow Taoists, please follow me." Back then, he leaped up and rode a streak of light towards the green leaf. Jinren Kongzheng smiled and stepped into the air as well. When they saw him move, Xiao Lingyun and Shang Shooting naturally followed along with all the cultivators of Yuxiao School. Heaven Mending Pavilion had been operating for tens of thousands of years, so there were many beautiful sceneries. However, at this moment, no one was in the mood to admire them. Tan Dingxian invited everyone to take their seats in the large pavilion, then he excused himself. As he walked out of the door, he saw Bu Jingsu was already waiting there. He took a few steps forward. And asked, "Junior brother, how is it?" Bu Jingsu replied, "I've already taken out all the pill jades according to senior brother sect master's wishes. I've already inspected them. Even if we fight for a few months, it should be enough. Heaven Mending Pavilion was called a sect, but in reality, it was the protector of the spiritual opportunity of the 9 continents. Because there were many methods left behind by their ancestors, they were not afraid of losing their inheritance. Therefore, there were at most 1 or 2 heavenly passage cultivators. As for the pill jades, they did not use them if they could. After tens of thousands of years, other than a few that were used to support their fellow Taoists, the rest were all saved up. It was all for the sake of being able to activate this formation diagram in the face of a great disaster. Tan Dingxian said, "It won't take that long. Not to mention a few months, even if Qinsang School is allowed to absorb half a month's worth of Earth Qi, the Donghua continent will end up like the West continent." Bu Jingsu said, "Shixiang is saying, within half a month. Is it a foregone conclusion?" Tan Dingxian said, "If nothing unforeseen happens, that should be the case." Bu Jingsu did not know what was going on. He did not say anything and only sighed softly. Tan Dingxian looked at him and thought that he was worried about the battle situation. She comforted him, "Junior apprentice brother, there's no need to worry. Qinsang, Shaoqing, and the other sects are going against the trend. It's an immoral act. They won't be popular in the end. They'll definitely be defeated." Bu Jingsu was not as confident as Tan Dingxian. He always felt that Qinsang School was prepared and unprepared, and that it would not be easy to deal with them. Just now, it was such a good situation, but Zhang Yan came out alone and almost turned the situation around. In the end, they were forced to use the tribulation fire, and just now, they were forced to retreat. Until now, Qinsang School had not used many tricks. They were most likely waiting for the right time. Looking at it from this perspective, it would be a tough battle. Tan Dingxian said a few words and did not want to delay any longer. He said, "I'll go activate the formation now. Junior apprentice brother, please greet the guests on my behalf." Bu Jingsu hurriedly said, "Don't worry, senior apprentice brother. With me here, nothing will go wrong." Meanwhile, in the main pavilion, Jinren Kongjing summoned Enlightened Bai to the side hall and said, "Junior apprentice brother, do you remember the 3 people who invaded our South Sea?" Enlightened Bai thought about it and said softly, "Senior apprentice brother, are you saying that if we leave, they'll come out again to stir up trouble?" Jinren Kongjing said with certainty, "It's not a possibility, it'll definitely happen." Enlightened Bai said with a serious expression, "Only Peak Master Qiao Ming and Hall Master Shi Ming are left in the sect. I'm afraid it won't be easy to deal with them. If Master is alarmed, it'll be our fault as disciples." Although Yuxiao Mountain Gate was guarded by Master Lingya, he vaguely knew that when one's cultivation base reached Master Lingya's level, there would be great consequences if he made a move. He might even give Qinsang and Shaoqing a chance. Only someone like Zhang Yan, who was too unreasonable, would provoke Master Lingya to take the initiative to make a move. However, it might not happen again. Besides, if Master Lingya had to take action personally for such a small matter, what was the use of disciples like them? Jinren Kongjing said, "Junior apprentice brother, have you noticed that the calamity fire has already descended for more than half a day, but my fate hasn't changed? Maybe that Zhang Yan is not dead yet, or maybe the other party has used some tricks again. However, it's not a good thing that our fate is equal. If we're not careful, we'll be at the bottom." Enlightened Bai understood and said softly, "So senior apprentice brother, you're leading everyone to the north on purpose to lure these people out, kill them, and save some fate at the same time?" Jinren Kongjing smiled faintly and said, "It's just a few people, it's not worth it for me to do this. However, I can get rid of them at the same time. After we leave, you can sneak back. There's no need to go to the mountains, just hide near the South Sea. If they come out, you can take care of them." As he spoke, he took out a few more Dharma treasures and handed them to him. He warned, previously, the 3 of them used the Dragon Palace to escape. This time, you have to be wary of this too. Although you have the immovable sphere technique, it only covers the 4 continents. If it's on the Southern Sea, I won't be able to stop him. Reverend Byron received it solemnly and said, "I know what to do." If they really come out to stir up trouble, I will do my best. If not, I can at least leave 1 or 2 people behind. Jinren Kongjin nodded and said, with you taking action, I can rest assured. In his opinion, although Baidu Jinren had not reached the stage of cultivating yuanqi, but compared to Wu Fenggu in the past, he was similar. If it was a head-on battle, it would not be a problem to take down the 3, after all, not everyone could be like that Zhang Yan. At that moment, a boy came in, bowed down and said, Lord, Reverend Bu is here. Jinren Kongjin grunted. Reverend Bairen stood up and bowed, saying, then I will take my leave first. About 2 hours later, Butian Pavilion's mountain gate suddenly changed into spiritual light. The mountains and rivers, pavilions, and towers suddenly collapsed. Everything here turned into a piece of flat map. Then, with a spin, it flew diagonally into the sky. A mountain gate formation was flying towards them. It was impossible for everyone in Qinsang school not to notice it. Seeing that Yu Xiao was about to fight a decisive battle, everyone's expression became solemn. Meng Zhen said in a deep voice, the 6 demonic sects are besieging Shaoqing. Yu Xiao school is heading north to suppress me, so I can't help from the side. Qi Hongchan also said, I think so too. Let's not talk about the fact that our fates are similar, Yu Xiao school still has many tricks up their sleeves. No matter what, it is not the time to stake everything on one throw. They are probably just bluffing to trip me up. Sun Jinren sneered, it doesn't matter even if it's true. He has the guts to fight, but I can't ask for more. At this moment, Hua Xian bowed towards his seat and said, I don't know how many people Yu Xiao sent, but to attack our mountain gate, there must be a lot of them. At this moment, Mo Chi Cliff should be extremely empty. This disciple thinks that we can call for Tao Jinren and the other 2 to attack. We don't hope to break through southern cliff continent, but to make it difficult for Yu Xiao. Sun Jinren said, is it too early to attack now? Qi Hongchan said, since Yu Xiao school came out this time, they won't turn back halfway. No matter when they attack, there shouldn't be any problems. Meng Zhen bowed towards his seat and said, the 3 people from the southern sea were originally controlled by Hall Master Du Zhen. Now that Hall Master Du Zhen isn't here, we can only ask Sect Master Spiritual Master to make a decision. Sect Master Qin thought for a moment, then said, Zhida, send a talisman to the southern sea. Let them act according to the situation. Meng Zhen stood up and acknowledged. Above the southern sea, the sects started to attack. Tao Jinhong and the other 2 were already secretly hiding in the formation plate under the sea. They adjusted their breathing and qi, conserving their energy. Once the Qinsang school's talisman arrived, they would be ready to attack. After an unknown period of time, Tao Jinren sensed something. He raised his head and opened his eyes. He stretched out his hand and caught an obscure talisman. He took a breath and opened it. He glanced at it and passed it to me and Li beside him. Li Xiaomi looked at it and said thoughtfully, they want me to find an opportunity to lead them? Tao Jinren shook his head and said, there's no need to wait any longer. Yu Xiao school won't be unprepared. It doesn't matter if it's earlier or later. He took out the source diagram of walking beasts and unfolded it in front of him. At this moment, the Sky Demon section was no longer blank. There was an additional jade dragon. His gaze paused for a moment before sweeping past it. When his gaze landed on the strange centipede section, a large toad that looked like it was carved out of crystal appeared. It was the abyss toad's soul essence. He raised his sleeves and with a low roar, he leaped out of the diagram. Chapter 1184. After Tao Jinhong released the abyss toad's soul, he didn't chase it away immediately. Instead, he flicked his sleeve and placed a gray stone body on the table. This was the toad's original physical body. When the monster toad was in his hands, its vitality wasn't completely depleted. Thus, he used a special method to refine it. If the 2 were to be combined, not only would its original abilities be intact, it would also be able to unleash greater power. More importantly, those who didn't know the inside story wouldn't be able to see through it. This could cause the opponent to make a wrong judgment. He used a spell and sent the soul into the stone body. It was his own physical body, so it was naturally very compatible. After a short while, a spiritual light rushed up to the surface of the sea. The abyss toad broke out of the stone body and let out a strange hiss. Instantly, it grew to a size of 10,000 feet. With one leap, it brought along a giant shadow and headed towards South Cliff Continent. After releasing the monster, Tao Xinhong didn't do anything else. He knew that Yuxiao School wouldn't let him succeed so easily. There should be some kind of setup, but he didn't know what it was. This monster toad was a natural variant that could swallow continents. If no one paid attention to it, the huge South Cliff Continent could be swallowed whole by it. If everything went smoothly, he could force the opponent's tricks out in the open. On Mo Chiu Cliff, only Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying were left. However, they were still recovering their spiritual energy. They thought that it would be peaceful for a while, but they sensed a monstrous monster aura pressing down on them. They couldn't help but be shocked. After a closer look, they realized that it was the South Sea. They couldn't sit still anymore. South Cliff Continent was Yuxiao School's base. If it was destroyed, even if they destroyed Qinsang School, it wouldn't be considered a victory. The two of them were about to fly out to help. However, they heard a voice beside their ears, "If the two of you go out, who will guard the gate? If you are attacked, do you need someone to resolve it?" The two of them paused and asked in shock, "Hall Master Kang Zheng?" Jinren Kangzheng's voice rang again, "I have already made arrangements. All of you just have to guard the door. Without my orders, even if the Southern Cliffs continent is destroyed, do not act recklessly." The two of them could only obediently accept the order and return. After receiving Kang Zheng's instruction, Taoist Master Bai Bai came out halfway. At this moment, he had already turned to the South Sea. He had originally thought that even though Tao Xinhong and the others had obtained the support of the Qinsang School, they could only cause some disturbance at most. Seeing the abyss toad come out, he couldn't help but feel surprised. His thoughts spun and he realized that apart from him, there was no other way to stop this monster. Abyss toads usually had two ways to deal with powerful enemies. One was to open their mouth and swallow. Even if people from the heavenly abode were to enter its stomach, it would be hard for them to escape. If they were unlucky, they would lose their lives. When they couldn't do anything to their opponents, they would do their best to make their bodies even larger in order to resist the attacks of external forces. It was rumored that it could become as big as a continent. It was for this reason that just now, it had attracted the ancient cultivators to hunt it down. Taoist Master Bai Bai originally thought that there was no such thing in this world. He didn't expect Tao Xinhong to have one. He sighed and no longer hid himself. He stood out from the darkness and blocked the monster's path. Li Xiaomi stared at him and said, "Looking at this person, he should be the Yuxiao School's Hall Master Bai Bai. I heard that this person isn't much weaker than that Wu Daoren." Tao Xinhong pondered for a while and said, "He might be even harder to deal with. Wu Ruyang is from the Wu clan, and when he fought with us, his mana is not as strong as before because of his lifespan. He doesn't have many treasures on him either." Li Xiaomi said, "Tao Xinren is right. With the abyss toad leading the way, we can test his abilities. Then, we will see how to deal with him." This time, their goal is no longer to invade, but to threaten the Yuxiao School's rear. So, we have to think of a way to defeat this person. The abyss toad's body was huge. With just a few leaps, it had already crossed the Fengling Ocean. When it saw Taoist Master Bai Bai, it opened its mouth. In a split second, it seemed like a hole was torn open between heaven and earth, producing a huge suction force that caused an immeasurable amount of seawater to pour into it. Taoist Master Bai Bai didn't release his dharma, he just used his mana and stabilized his body. He also roughly estimated the level of this abyss toad and thought that it was easy to deal with. Although it was a mutated species, as long as it hadn't crossed that barrier, it wasn't too difficult to deal with. Back then, the Yuxiao School cultivators killed countless poisonous insects and mutated species in the Southern Cliff continent, so they had many ways to deal with them. He took out a colorful fragment from his sleeve and sprinkled it outside. With a turn of the wind, it floated towards the abyss toad's mouth. This thing was called Lights-yusha. It was actually made by sacrificing a kind of demonic insect and star sand. It was also left behind by a sect that was once destroyed by the Yuxiao school. It was specially used to deal with huge monsters like the demon toad. As long as a little bit of it went into the stomach, it could use its blood to breed millions of insects that would corrode the internal organs. As long as it didn't encounter a monster like the ancient sky demon, it would be enough to deal with it. When Tao Zhenhong saw it, he knew that the opponent made a mistake and his expression instantly brightened. In a battle, sometimes a small mistake could determine life and death. Now that he saw the opponent making a mistake, how could he not take advantage of this opportunity? He said, "Fellow Taoists, please make your move." Mi Zhenren was already waiting for him to make his move. As soon as he heard his words, he immediately pressed his fingers together and with a wave of his hand, a black and a white blade ray split the sea waves and flew out. Li Xiaomi cast a xian horn to the sky and shot it down from above. It was not to hurt the opponent, but to restrain him. Enlightened Master Bai Bai glanced at it casually and with just a point, a ray of clear light flew out from his fingertip and easily destroyed the flying blade ray. The light was neither more nor less, it just melted the blade ray and just now, it completely disappeared. As for the xian horn on top of his head, he didn't pay much attention to it. With a shake of his sleeve, it actually disappeared without a trace. No one knew where it went. Li Xiaomi made a hand sign and summoned it. She could feel that the xian horn was still there, but she couldn't summon it back. She immediately knew that the xian horn was hit by the Yuxiao school's bright sky spinning illumination. This treasure was fixed by the opponent's star qi and fell into the disordered space domain created by the Yuxiao school. If she didn't eliminate the opponent, she wouldn't be able to retrieve it. Tao Zhenren's expression became more serious. He could see that in that instant, this person actually used 3 xian horn consecutively. Moreover, there was no trace of delay between the retraction and release of the xian horn, as if it was released in one breath. If Wu Ruyang had cultivated his cultivation to the extreme, then this person had used xian horn's Dao techniques to the acme of perfection. Facing such an opponent, he became even more cautious. However, the purpose of this attack was achieved. The demon toad used this opportunity to bite down and engulfed an area of tens of thousands of miles. Spiritual Master Bai Bai saw that the demon toad didn't have any abnormalities and couldn't help but be surprised. According to what was said, when the Lights-yusha entered the stomach, it wouldn't take more than 10 breaths for it to take effect. However, this demon toad acted as if nothing had happened. It was either that his previous attack was restrained by the opponent, or he made a mistake. He immediately sensed it, and after probing it a little, he knew that he had misjudged it. He snorted, but didn't feel the slightest bit annoyed. Instead, he even had the leisure to praise it a few times. He took out a hand seal, and with a flash of lightning, he escaped into the cave. The next moment, his figure appeared out of thin air in the high heavens. If the cultivators of the cave went in and out of the cave outside the mountain gate, they would usually consume a lot of mana and couldn't return to the original place. However, he was different. Although he wasn't good at mana, he was gifted. In the path of Xian Horn's Tao of transformations, he surpassed everyone in the sect. 1 part of mana could do 10 parts of things. Not talking about cultivation, just talking about this path, even Zhenren Kongjing was far inferior to him. He pressed his hand down, and there was a clear light falling down, almost covering the sea in an instant. When the demon toad was illuminated by this light, its body melted away. Even the soul essence below it couldn't bear it and showed signs of disintegration. Tao Zhenhong saw this and knew that the demon toad couldn't fight with him at all. Thus, he made a prompt decision and opened the walking beast diagram. With a call, the soul essence turned into a spiritual light, abandoned its body, and flew back. However, when it fell on the diagram, it became a lot dimmer. Obviously, it was injured a lot. If it wanted to be used again, it would need to be nourished for a period of time. Spiritual Master Bai turned his head and looked at the direction of the spiritual light. He didn't have any expression on his face, but deep in his eyes, there was a trace of killing intent. For him, it wasn't difficult to defeat this person. The difficult part was how to make him stay. After flying for half a day from the mountain gate of the Butian Pavilion, they arrived above the Qing River. When they reached this place, they stopped. Jinren Kangjing used the excuse of attacking Qinsang School to pass down a decree. He wanted all the cultivators of the Heavenly Passage sects to gather at the big pavilion. Once this order was issued, no one from the 3 sects dared to disobey. Each sect only left one person to guard the sect, and the rest all came to listen to the order. However, it was not easy to gather all the forces of the sects in one place. Although all the sect masters were there, and they had already discussed it in detail, it still took several hours to arrange everything properly. Just as they were about to cross the Qing River, they suddenly heard the sound of surging water. It seemed like it was right next to their ears, but it also seemed like it was far away in the sky. Jinren Kangjing seemed to have thought of something. His expression changed, and he suddenly turned around. When he looked back, he saw that there was a vast white gas behind him, and he couldn't see the end of it from the front to the back. Everyone was surprised and bewildered when they saw this scene. Xiao Lingyun asked in a low voice, "Is this the method of Qinsang School?" Jinren Kangjing couldn't see through the details, and it was hard for him to differentiate. At this time, a voice suddenly entered his ears. It was a change in the technique. He listened carefully for a moment, took a deep breath, turned around, and said in a low voice, "Just now, esteemed master transmitted a message to me. This is the mysterious technique of Qinsang School. This white river can separate the 2 worlds. If it isn't broken, even if I travel for tens or hundreds of years, it will still be difficult for me to reach the other side." Shang Shooting frowned and said, "This mysterious technique of Qinsang School is actually not blocking the way in front, but cutting off the road behind. This is clearly cutting off my return path." Jinren Kangjing looked towards the direction of the Mo Chiu cliff. He felt that Qinsang School's intentions were not that simple. Moreover, if someone were to attack Southern Cliff Continent, he wouldn't be able to use treasures to help. Chapter 1185. The white qi traveled across the horizon, stretching from west to east, cutting off the north and south. Enlightened Master Bai also saw it. With his knowledge, he could roughly guess that this was the doing of Qinsang School. However, he did not mind. Even without help, he was confident that he could still win this battle. His expression did not change as he held the rui of steadying in his hand and did not move an inch. The opponents were protected by formation plates. If he took the initiative to attack, even if he could break through, he would have to pay a heavy price. Since the other party had come for the Southern Cliffs continent and had created such a huge commotion just now, it was obvious that they were acting under the orders of the Dark Azure sect. They wouldn't give up so easily. He believed that it would not be long before they came looking for him again. He just had to wait. Once they fought, he would have the chance to take his life. In the deep sea formation plate, Li Xiumi saw that the opponent's divine art was powerful and thought of avoiding the main attack. He said, "Most of the cultivators from Yuxiao School are heading north to attack Qinsang. He is the only one here to stop us, but there are 3 of us. Why don't we split up and attack?" Tao Zhenhong thought for a while and rejected, "It is too risky." Daoistly, if this plan was in the past, he would not be able to split himself. However, enlightened Master Bai would not leave such a big gap. He might have some kind of teleportation talisman on him and is waiting for me to walk into his trap. If the 3 of them worked together, they could still contend with him. However, if they split up, the opponent could use teleportation and take them down one by one. Moreover, it was impossible for Mo Chiu Cliff to not leave a single mountain guard behind. If the opponent threw in a talisman to help, it would be even harder to defend. Li Xiumi thought again and said, "If that is the case, we cannot avoid this person if we want to attack Southern Cliffs continent." Tao Zhenhong's gaze seemed to sharpen. He said, "It doesn't matter if we cannot avoid him. We just have to fight him." Compared to the battle with Wu Ruyang, this time, not only did he have the spirit of the Chua dragon, he also had the 36 mountains. With the three of them together, he had a higher chance of winning. Li Xiaomi turned to look at Mi Zhenren. He asked, "What do you think?" Mi Zhenren didn't care about the specifics. She only asked, "When do we do it?" Tao Zhenhong pondered for a moment and put away the plainer beasts in his hand. He said, "Let's go and see who's the winner." Enlightened being Bai Bai waited on the sea for less than an hour before he sensed something. He looked up and saw 3 rays of light flying towards him. He couldn't help but smile. He revealed an expression as if he had expected it. The 3 streaks of light quickly arrived before him and split up. Tao Zhenhong stood in the center and bowed, saying, "Zhenren Zhou, please excuse me." Enlightened being Bai Bai waved his sleeve and said, "It's fine, it's just that we have our own masters." Mi Zhenren frowned. He replied coldly, "What do you mean by that?" "Qinsong and I are not master and servant, but allies." Taoist Master Bai Bai chuckled. With a hint of disdain on his face, he said, "Is that so?" Li Xiaomi laughed and said, "It must be because your esteemed sect has been treating the other sects as servants for a long time, that's why you treat us like this." He originally wanted to use his words to stab him, but he didn't expect Taoist Master Bai Bai to act like this was how it should be. He said, "The strong are respected while the weak are humble. It's natural for the capable to be at the top. I, Yu Xiao, am the master, and the other sects are the servants. Why can't I? You think you're different, but you don't know that you're just a few chess pieces in the hands of Qinsang school that can be discarded at any time." Tao Zhenren didn't want to argue with him and said, "Today is a battle of life and death. What's the point of talking about this?" Enlightened being Bai Bai glanced at the 3 of them and said, "Then I'll ask for your wisdom." Mi Zhenren didn't like him, so as soon as he finished speaking, she was the first to move. Facing such an opponent, she didn't hold back at all. She summoned a jade drum in the sky. As the drum vibrated, countless thin threads appeared in the atmosphere. At the same time, she put 2 fingers together, raised her hand, and slashed out several rays of saber qi. Li Xiaomi didn't fall behind, and immediately blew out a black smoke from her mouth. This smoke looked normal, but it was refined by the mirage qi left behind by the dead mirage worm. As long as it came into contact with the body, it would cause the opponent to fall into a trance. And in a battle, this kind of carelessness was enough to be fatal. Tao Zhenhong didn't make a move yet, but he was ready. In their previous discussion, it was very likely that the opponent would use the vast cloud of one breath of heaven. He didn't know how to break out of the trap, but as long as he was prepared, he would have a way to avoid it. The 3 of them didn't talk about what happened before, but after fighting a few times with Yuxiao School in the Southern Sea, they knew each other's methods, and their teamwork was quite good. And what was rare was that the cultivators of the world Grotto Heaven, in order to preserve their spiritual energy, most of them hadn't fought with anyone for hundreds or even thousands of years. Compared to them, they could be considered as veterans of the battle. Spiritual Master Bai Bai saw the attack from both sides, and he calmly circulated his spiritual energy. The jade scepter flew up from his hand, and instantly stopped the incoming qi. Then, he waved his other hand, and a dazzling clear light was released. In the blink of an eye, whether it was the saber qi or the black smoke, they were all melted by the light. Spiritual pivot jade clear light. The 3 of them saw it and quickly dodged. Spiritual Master Bai Bai's reaction was expected. At his level of cultivation, he didn't need to pay attention to strategies, and he could just use his divine arts to subdue the enemy. He also knew that if the opponent was prepared, they could also find a way to break this divine art. But he was different from others, his divine arts were at the acme of perfection, and he could casually shoot out dozens of them. The spiritual pivot jade clear light was the second divine art in the sect, and it was extremely powerful. It might be possible for the opponent to deal with one, but to deal with dozens of them at once, he didn't believe it at all. After Tao Xinren retreated far away, he already understood that unless his divine art was stronger than the opponent's, or his spiritual energy was far stronger than the opponent's, then he wouldn't be able to face it head-on, or else he could only avoid it. But if he didn't have any other moves, he wouldn't choose to fight. So, he opened the source diagram and walking beast diagram, and with a swipe of his hand, a long dragon that looked like a fine jade fell down. Spiritual Master Bai Bai thought it was a flood dragon, but when he recognized the breath, he immediately felt something was wrong, and his expression changed. Heavenly Demon's soul essence. His expression instantly became extremely solemn, even though heavenly demons could no longer be seen in the world, but the records still existed, and he was very clear that normal divine arts were useless against heavenly demons. If it was a one-on-one fight, he might still have a chance, but if there were 3 of his peers by his side, he really might not be able to win. He sneered, "I thought you guys dared to come out and fight with me, so you have this to rely on. I initially thought that I wouldn't need to use that thing to take down these few people, but if I don't use it now, I'm afraid there will be some changes." He took out a ball of star sand from his sleeve. Just now, there was a bright light coming out from the gap between his fingers, but strangely, the surroundings suddenly darkened, as if all the light outside his body was attracted to it. When Tao Xinren saw it, his expression changed. Although he didn't know what the opponent took out, he could feel that once this thing was taken out, the spiritual vigor in the surroundings started to fluctuate violently. Without thinking, he quickly moved back, and at the same time, he shouted, "Fellow Taoists, retreat quickly." Spiritual Master Bai Bai sneered and said, "Too late." He didn't dare to hold this thing in his hand for too long, and as he spoke, he shook his sleeve and threw it out. In an instant, it was as if there was an additional bright Milky Way in the south of the 9 continents, connecting the heaven and the earth. Even the cultivators in the far north could see it. In Butian Pavilion, Xinren Kangzheng looked back, stroked his beard, and said, "There's no need to worry about the South Sea." Under the West Sea's eye, Zhang Yan was also paying attention to the situation in the South Sea. When he saw this scene, his gaze also froze, and he said, "Divine Myriad Celestial Star Sand? I didn't expect Zhou Liquang to bring this thing with him. I'm afraid the 3 Taoists won't be able to pass this hurdle." This item was passed down by the Yuxiao Patriarch Yao Han, and in terms of power, it was not inferior to the All Heavens Combined Divine Water Forbidden Light in the Qinsang school. He had heard Zhou Chengju say that because this sand was not easy to refine, and because of the changes in the spiritual energy of the world in the past 10,000 years, there was not much in the Yuxiao school. Even in the heavenly grottos, if one wasn't from the Zhou family's direct bloodline, they would not be able to get their hands on it. This kind of thing was enough to be used as a killing move when fighting with the cultivators of the Qinsang school, but he didn't expect it to be used on the South Sea. He wanted to completely end this matter once and for all, so that the rear would not be threatened again. This price was huge, but looking at the overall situation, it was not incomprehensible. Zhang Yan thought about it again. At this moment, the retreat of the Yuxiao people and their allies had been cut off by Xian Shu, and temporarily could not come back to help the southern cliff continent. It could be said that it was abnormally empty, and the danger of their retreat was so easily resolved, it was too easy for them. He pondered for a while and looked outside. The tribulation fire outside did not show any signs of dissipating. It was impossible to hope for it to dissipate on its own. The few profound techniques that the Yuxiao school had previously sent out were still being used on the 9 continents, and had yet to dissipate. The tribulation fire would not dissipate so easily, unless there was an external force to destroy it. However, this did not mean that he could not move. One had to know that the demon treasury could also move and escape. The only concern was that after moving to another place, the demon treasury would be discovered by others. However, this was different from just now. After hiding under the eye of the sea, so much time had passed, and no one would waste their magic power to keep staring at this place. He could be a little more daring. After thinking for a while, he took out a spell. After a short while, there was a rumbling sound. With a shift of the demon treasury, it was already outside the eye of the sea. As expected, the tribulation fire also chased after him. He ignored it and continued to use the demon treasury to teleport. After many tries, he found out that the further away he was from the tribulation fire, the faster it would chase after him. However, if the distance between the two of them was only tens of thousands of miles, he would be able to shake it off. Only after a long period of time would he be able to close in again. Although he did not understand the reason behind it, he felt that he could use this to do something. As he continued to use his mana to teleport, without anyone noticing, he had unknowingly arrived at the top of the southern sea. When he arrived, he sensed that with his current speed, the tribulation fire would only arrive in about an hour. This period of time was enough for him to settle the matters outside. Thus, he held the northern dark sword, stood up, and walked out of the demon treasury step by step. Chapter 1186. At the bottom of the South Sea, Tao Zhenhong and the others saw that Bai Bai had the extremely powerful star sand in his hand and knew that it would be difficult to defeat him, so they could only retreat back into the formation plate. However, at this moment, half of Li Xiumi's body was glowing. As it glowed, one could see wisps of spiritual energy drifting out from it as if it was disintegrating bit by bit. It was caused by the Li Xiumi's star sand. Since Daoist Bai Bai had never used the Li Xiumi's star sand before, he knew that it was extremely powerful. He was afraid that if he was unlucky, he would also fall into it, so he didn't dare to use it freely. Otherwise, no matter how powerful the three of them were, they would have already turned into nothingness under the sand. But even so, as long as a little bit of it touched his body, it would continuously melt the essence of his Dharma body. In the end, it would still be difficult for him to escape death. Li Xiumi knew that in at most 10 breaths of time, he would lose his life, so he bowed and said, "After I leave, I'll have to trouble fellow Daoist Tao to hand over the corporeal body I left in the small world to my disciples. If possible, I hope fellow Daoist Tao can take care of my disciples in the future." Tao Zhenhong solemnly bowed back and said, "If I can survive this battle, I'll definitely take care of your disciples." If he didn't notice something wrong in time just now and had the protection of the Chua dragon, he would have ended up the same way. Mi Zhenren raised her hand to take a look. On her fingertip, there was also a little starlight. It looked like it was just a little bit, but once the star sand touched her body, it invaded her body and couldn't be expelled anymore. Right now, it was slowly eroding her mana essence. She covered it with her sleeve and shouted, "If I die, then I die. What's there to be afraid of?" Li Xiumi laughed at himself and said, "Although I've thought that this day would come and I've already seen through it, but when it really comes, there are still some worries that I can't let go." As he spoke, the light gradually spread to his cheeks, and half of his body was gone. He showed a look of pity and said, "It's a pity that I can't see the scenery of the world beyond heaven." Tao Zhenren said, "If we win this battle, fellow Daoist Li will be able to see it." Because they knew that this battle was going to be extremely dangerous, the three of them had already left their soul fragments outside and kept them in an appropriate place. If the Qinsang school won, then they could reincarnate as humans, and there would be people coming to receive them in the future. Naturally, everything would be over. Li Xiumi smiled and said, "I was originally a living creature in the wilderness." The stone man understood the mystery and discerned the emotions. "My body dispersed and my heart was not at rest. My lineage will be passed down for 10,000 years." He finished his sentence. His entire body had already dispersed amidst the fluorescence, turning into a ball of stardust and finally disappearing without a trace. Perfected Tao sighed and bowed to the other meditation cushions that they were sitting on. At this moment, Mi Zhenren's arms were already glowing faintly. Even her clothes couldn't hide it. She suddenly stood up and walked out. "Where is Mi Zhenren going?" Tao Zhenren asked in a deep voice. Mi Zhenren replied, "Rather than sitting here and waiting for death, it's better to go out and fight with that person. It'll also let him know that our Chongyu temple isn't without people." Tao Zhenren sighed. He didn't say anything to dissuade her. Mi Zhenren stopped and threw out a light. When it landed on the ground, it turned into a jade drum. She said, "This is a treasure that I used to create my heavenly abode. It's useless to keep it with me now. If you can use it, then keep it. If you can't, then throw it away. After saying that, without waiting for Tao Xinren to reply, she leapt out of the formation plate in a streak of white light. Taoist Master Bai Bai was sitting on a cloud raft, adjusting his qi. Just now, he didn't follow up with another attack. First, he was afraid that the three of them would risk their lives to counterattack. Second, he didn't think that releasing the flying star sand would cost him a lot of mana. He's someone who wouldn't act rashly if he wasn't sure. So he'd rather wait and recover his mana before making a move. Fortunately, before coming to the Southern Sea, he obtained a few precious pills from the sect. He estimated that he'd be able to recover his mana in a few hours. In fact, he didn't care about Tao Xinhong and the other two anymore. He was sure that just now, at least two of them were affected by the flying star sand. As long as the sand touched their bodies, no matter what technique they used, they wouldn't be able to save their lives. Moreover, the more they used their mana, the faster they died. As for the last person, even if he didn't purposely deal with him, he wouldn't be able to cause much trouble. Not long after, his expression changed. He stood up and saw a white-clothed woman walking over on the waves. Glancing over, he saw that one of her arms was glowing. She snorted and said, "Mi Xinren, if you were inside the formation plate, you'd be able to live for another 2 hours. But if you use your mana now, you'll only be able to live for half a minute." Mi Xinren revealed a disdainful expression and said, "My life and death are not up to you to decide." As she spoke, a layer of colorless flame floated around her body, as if her whole body was burning. This was the most powerful divine art of the Chongyue True Temple. It was called Micro-Universal Slash. This technique required one to sacrifice one's spirit, qi, and spirit to transform into a pair of yin and yang blades. As long as the blade rays didn't dissipate, even if one hid in a small world, they would still be able to slash. This was equivalent to ending one's life prematurely. Even if the flying star sand touched one's body, it wouldn't have any effect. Spiritual Master Bai Bai didn't think much of it at first, but as the aura became more and more intense, his expression became more serious. He raised the jade scepter in his hand slightly. He could see that the other party had used her divine art the moment she came out of the formation plate. At this moment, even if he tried to stop her, he wouldn't be able to do it. Once Xinren Mi's energy was ready, his body suddenly dispersed. He turned into a blade light that was as bright as the sun, and he charged forward. Spiritual Master Bai Bai didn't want to risk his life against a person who was going to die, so he used his mana and escaped into his own cave, hoping to avoid it. However, the next moment, he saw that the blade ray actually pierced through the world, as if it had the power to slash this cave. He couldn't help but be shocked. He wanted to throw the jade scepter in his hand up, then he didn't even look at the result and escaped again. With a loud bang, he escaped from the void. After a while, he didn't see the blade ray chasing after him. However, he sensed that it was contained and not spat out, as if it could slash out from the void at any time. Spiritual Master Bai Bai's expression changed slightly. How could he not know that he had fallen into a trap? Mi Xinren purposely left the blade ray in his cave as a deterrent. As long as the blade ray didn't leave, the next time he entered the cave, he would definitely be slashed by the blade. Just thinking about it made him very sad. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt like something was wrong. He focused his energy and turned his head to the north. He saw an indistinct black saber energy heading towards the southern cliff. This was because Mi Xinren knew that he might not be able to kill his opponent even if he used both blades together. Thus, he purposely split the two blades. The yang blade chased after the opponent while the yin blade slashed towards the southern cliff continent. Spiritual Master Bai snorted and said, "What a good plan. If I am even slightly careless, you will ruin the continent." To guard against the yang blade that could slash out at any time, he didn't dare to use his divine art. He only threw out a golden plate the size of a palm. After the treasure landed on his feet, it shone up and wrapped around his body. In a blink of an eye, he had already escaped into the void. In just a few breaths, he was in front of the blade ray. However, at this point, he was also forced to not block it. Otherwise, the southern cliff continent would definitely be destroyed. He made a hand sign and a clear light surged behind him. He took the initiative to go up. However, right at this moment, 8 white flood dragons flew out of nowhere. They weaved through the air and collided with the clear light ahead of time. Immediately, the two melted away and disappeared. Tao Jinhong. Spiritual Master Bye frowned. However, the black blade ray had already arrived. He had no time to be distracted. He shook his wrist and cut off all 5 of his fingers. They turned into 5 rays of starlight and collided with the blade ray. After 4 rays of starlight were destroyed, the blade ray finally turned and disappeared. The last ray of starlight landed and returned to its original position. Looking at his palm again, there was only a thumb left. The physical body of a cultivator from the celestial sect of wonders was very important. Now that he had given up 4 fingers, it meant that there was no way for him to take another step forward. Even if he didn't think about it, he still felt inexplicably annoyed. Raising his head, he saw Tao Jinren sitting on the azure phoenix, floating in the sky. Letting out a cold laugh, he said, "Tao Jinren, originally, I wouldn't have come looking for you if you were hiding in the array. But since you can't wait to die, I can grant you your wish." Just as he was about to step forward to find trouble with Tao Jinren, his body trembled and he looked behind him. The seawater split apart, and a young Taoist dressed in a black robe emerged, his sleeves fluttering in the wind. He held a sword in his hand and stepped out on his chi. Taoist Master Bai immediately lost his calm demeanor, and a trace of fear appeared in his eyes. He said in horror, "Zhang Yan." He had seen how Zhang Yan killed Chu Rui. After Chu Rui was forced away by the tribulation fire, he was glad that he didn't have to face such a great enemy. But now that this person appeared in front of him, how could he not panic? He suddenly shouted, and without caring about anything else, he gathered all the mana in his body and shot rays of clear jade light over. Zhang Yan's eyes were slightly red and purple. He took a slight breath and then blew out a breath. This breath rushed out like a tsunami, and everywhere it passed, the clear lights in the sky were all shattered. Taoist Master Bai was shocked. This was the purest collision of mana. His opponent's cultivation was far better than his, so no matter what kind of technique he used, it would be useless. He was also decisive. He immediately took out the bright star constant stabilization technique, and spots of starlight sprinkled down, covering his body. Just now he was holding this technique, but there was a ray of sword light that came through the sky, slashing right on the starlight. In an instant, it was shattered, and it couldn't stop it at all. Seeing that the sword light was about to take the opportunity to cut him in half, suddenly a vast and imposing spiritual light descended, wrapping around him, and in an instant, he disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows, and put away the North Dark Sword. At this time, Tao Jinren came over, and said, "Taoist Master Zhang, just now, that aura isn't something we can do." Was it Master Lingya who made a move? Zhang Yan looked in the direction of Southern Cliffs continent, and sneered, "This was what Master Lingya told us. With him in Southern Cliffs continent, no matter how hard we try, it's useless." Tao Jinren thought for a moment, and said, "Taoist Master Zhang, do you think that Southern Cliffs continent still wants to fight?" Zhang Yan laughed lightly, and said, "Why not? With this person in Southern Cliffs continent, does it mean that there's no one behind us? If he comes out, there will naturally be 2 sect masters to receive him. There's no need to care at all." Chapter 1187. Zhang Yan was able to know a lot of secrets when he was in the position of Hall Master Duzhen in Qinsang School. The world was different now. When one's cultivation reached the level of the heads of several sects, one must not act rashly. If Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity was exhausted, or if he used too much of his mana, then his great ascension would be delayed, and he could only stay in this place. According to what he knew, even if there was still Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity in this world, there was not much left. If Master Lingye had the confidence to defeat the accumulation of Qinsong and Shaoqing sects, he could have made a move right away and forced the heads of the two sects to come out and fight with him. When Clear Purple's spiritual opportunity was exhausted, he would win even if he could not win. Just now, at this critical moment, it would be best for Master Lingye to take him down. However, he did not do so. Instead, he saved Zhou Liguang. It was obvious that he did not want to have a direct conflict with the heads of the two sections. It was also because he saw through this that he dared to attack the South Cliff continent. From this aspect, the technique of moving the wings to victory just happened to be able to obtain the greatest results with the smallest price. Because in this way, the masters of both sides didn't have to personally enter the battlefield to fight, and only the disciples of their sects could decide the outcome of the battle. Tao Xinren sighed, I didn't expect that Zhou Liguang would still escape. It's a pity for the two Taoists. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered and he said, Taoist friend, please wait here for a moment. I'll go and settle this score. He sensed that the tribulation fire was getting closer. There was only half an hour left for him. However, it was enough to destroy the continent. If Master Lingye did not send someone to stop it, then he could only watch the continent being destroyed. Unless he really took action to protect it personally. However, if he really did that, it would definitely exhaust his spiritual opportunity. Qinsong's side would gain more than destroying the continent. Zhang Yan once thought that if Master Lingye gave up on ascension, then he might be able to drag everyone down with him. However, he believed that Sect Master Qin should have considered this before, so he did not think too much about it. Thus, he took a step forward and spread out his Dharma. Boom! A vast and mighty profound qi was immediately unleashed. After tumbling for a while, it brought with it the momentum of a torrent as it rolled towards the north. Looking at the situation, if no one went forward to stop them, they would not be able to escape. It would definitely be able to smash the Southern Cliffs continent into pieces. At this time, in the Jade Heaven sect, a spiritual light flashed on a certain peak. Taoist Master Bai Pai appeared from within and went outside. He then knelt on the ground and said, Disciple thanks Venerable Master for saving my life. Although he was in a sorry state this time, he still managed to escape with his life. He still had lingering fear in his heart. It was just that when he bowed down, he heard the voice beside his ear and immediately revealed a look of respect. After a long time, he bowed a few more times and said, This disciple understands and will not disappoint the sect's trust. After the sound faded away. His expression was a bit unsightly, and he couldn't help but sigh as he descended the mountain and returned to his cave. At this time, he suddenly remembered that there was still a blade glow in his grotto heaven that he had not gotten rid of. He couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. However, it wasn't that easy to get rid of it. Moreover, he didn't have the time right now, so he could only put it aside. He swallowed a few pills and adjusted his breathing. He found one of his trusted disciples and gave him a few words of advice. The disciple bowed and left after receiving the order. He then turned to the boy beside him and said, Quickly bring Peak Leader Gue Ming and Hall Leader Xian Ming here. Not long later, Zhou Ruiying and Wu Yunbi arrived at the hall. After the greetings, Taoist Master Bai Bai invited the two of them to sit down and said solemnly, You should also know that Zhang Yan is heading towards the Southern Cliffs continent. This place is the foundation of our Yuxiao cultivation. We must try to stop him. Wu Yunbi said solemnly, It's not that I want to boost his morale, but I'm afraid that the three of us are not his match. In order to protect the sect, I have nothing to fear, but I'm afraid that even if I give up my life, it will still be difficult to protect the Southern Cliffs continent. He could clearly see that even Yuan Yang sect master Chu Rui, a third-stage cultivator who had cultivated Yuan embryo, died in the hands of Zhang Yan, so he didn't think that he could win against such a person. Taoist Master Bai Bai did not deny it and said, It's extremely difficult to win against him, but it's not impossible to just delay him. Delay? Wu Yunbi was startled, but he immediately reacted, Could it be that the sect has other reinforcements? Daoist Master Bai shook his head and said, now that senior brother Kang Zheng and the other sect's Taoists have been intercepted by the Qinsang school at the north of River Cheng, they can't come back for the time being. As for the sects, only one person is left to guard the sect. Even if they can be mobilized, they won't be able to rush over in a short period of time. We can only rely on ourselves. Wu Yunbi thought for a moment and asked, how long will it take? Enlightened being Bai cupped his fist and replied, just now, Venerable Meng has informed me that Zhang Yan has yet to shake off the stellar stone tribulation fire. I don't know what technique he used to conceal it, but he has temporarily left it behind. From the looks of it now, the fire will arrive at most 3 minutes, and he will definitely retreat by then. Wu Yunbi's eyes lit up. So you're saying that we only need to delay this person for 3/4 of an hour? He slowly nodded. That's worth a try, but there's a problem. Reverend Byron said, what trouble? Wu Yunbi said, Hall Master Xian Ming and I have fought with Zhang Yan in the northern underworld continent. This person is indeed powerful and mysterious. Previously, no matter how the 4 of us attacked, we couldn't break the protective spell around him. If he ignored us and attacked the South Cliff continent, how can we stop him? Taoist Master Bai Ji said, it's all right. He waved his hand outside, and a disciple who was waiting outside the door came in. He placed a jade bucket with a full belly and a thin neck on the table. He pointed at it and said, this is the divine firmament's 1,000 luminary flying star sand. It's enough to fight against Zhang Yanfang. However, this sand is too powerful and consumes a lot of energy. Be careful when you use it. We don't expect to kill him this time, just force him to retreat. Wu Yunbi was slightly surprised, and at the same time, his spirit was slightly lifted. He said, with this, we can really fight against that Zhang Yan. Unfortunately, it's too rare. Reverend Byron said, this sand is too difficult to refine. Other than the ones that were taken by Hall Master Kang Zheng, the rest are all here. He looked outside and his expression darkened. He stood up and said, this person is getting closer and closer to the South Cliff continent. We can't delay any longer. Quickly keep it and follow me. Without waiting for the 2 to agree, he took out a talisman and shook it. Scattered golden lights fell down and wrapped the 3 of them. They flew out of the mountain gate with the speed of a meteor. In just half a minute, they arrived at the South Cliff continent. At this moment, it was impossible to see any seawater within an area of a few tens of thousands of kilometers above the surface of the heavenly South Sea. It was already enveloped by the vast and boundless profound energy, and it seemed as if everything outside of this body had become chaotic. This kind of pressure that seemed to shake the heaven and earth was not something that a normal grotto heaven cultivator could do. The 3 of them just stood in front of him and felt that the chi dynamic was not smooth. Reverend Byron pretended to be excited and said, this person dared to use his dharma, I can use the stardust to attack him. He turned his head and said, the 2 of you stay behind and cover for me. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying quickly agreed. Enlightened Master Bai immediately tapped his feet, and a bright starlight appeared below him, slowly rising into the air. It was night time, and from the ground, it was as if a brilliant golden smoke was rising into the sky. It was abnormally gorgeous. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying also followed. They stood on the left and right, but their positions were quite far apart. This way, if the situation was smooth, they could move forward to outflank Reverend Byron. If Reverend Byron could not hold on, they could help in time. Zhang Yan stood on the Xian Qi Sea with his sleeves behind his back. He could clearly see the situation in front of him. Seeing that Zhou Liguang came out to stop him as he expected, he sneered and shook his sleeves to cast a high sky thunder shock technique. In an instant, the surrounding 10,000 miles was filled with lightning. Streaks of lightning jumped out from the void and flew everywhere. No one knew where they would land in the next moment. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying were prepared to help, but when they saw the situation, they realized that unless they used their dharma and charged over, they would not be able to get close. The 2 of them also knew that it was a bad idea. They communicated with each other through telepathy and decided not to go forward for now. They would wait and see what would happen. Reverend Byron quickly took out a four-cornered bronze pavilion. He stood in it and a bright golden light rose from his feet. No matter how the lightning struck, it could not break through. He took a look. Both sides were still far away and it was not suitable for him to take out the stardust. He thought for a while and decided to wait until he was closer. Thus, he took out a bronze pendant from his sleeve and threw it into the sky. There was a rustling sound and a white mist spurted out from it. The mist rumbled and seemed to be boiling. This was known as the Qi of Confusion. As long as it could be mixed into a cultivator's Qi machine, it could be integrated into one slowly. Even the spirit could be dissolved. He did not expect this Qi to be able to stop Zhang Yan. He only wanted to use it to confuse the spiritual vigor so that it would be easier for him to use the stardust later. Zhang Yan raised his hand and pressed down lightly. A strong gust of wind blew past. However, the white fog did not dissipate. Instead, it grew thicker and thicker. It covered the air densely and was even corroding the spiritual vigor in the surroundings. He scoffed coldly and took out the dragon's soul essence from his sleeve. He released a lot of abyssal heavy water and made a gesture. Instantly, countless abyssal heavy water droplets appeared around him. Soon, the Qi was filled with these droplets and they rolled forward under the control of the dragon's soul essence. Reverend Byron took a few glances and said to himself, "Abyssal heavy water." Ever since Zhang Yan entered the grotto heaven, he had fought with others several times. Naturally, his techniques were known by others. This time, there was indeed a lot of abyssal heavy water in the surroundings. That was why he made such a judgment. Reverend Byron pondered and thought that Zhang Yan was using this to stop Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying from getting close to him so that he could isolate himself in it. He was not afraid. He had the stardust in his hand. As long as he threw it out, the other party would have to focus on defending and would not have time to care about anything else. By then, it would be up to him whether to retreat or advance. As he was thinking, he saw that the Qi was gradually pressing towards him. He did not hesitate anymore. He waved his sleeve and released the Qi of separation in his hand. To be continued. Chapter 1188. The Shaoqing sect leader, Yu Xianshao, stood in the Pure Grace Palace. Although the illusions of the Devil's doctrine were constantly attacking the sect's formation, he didn't seem to hear it. He just looked in the direction of the South Cliffs continent. Currently, the leaders of the Qinsong, Shaoqing, Yuxiao, and Nether Spring sects were restraining each other. They seemed calm on the surface, but no one would act rashly. If one of them showed a flaw, it was very likely that others would attack. In order to avoid giving their opponents a chance, they just sat and watched the cultivators from their sects fight. At the moment, Zhang Yan was attacking in the direction of the South Cliffs continent. This was the most important place of Yuxiao, where the spiritual cave was located. If it was destroyed, it would undoubtedly be a heavy blow to Yuxiao, and it might even shake people's hearts. Yu Xianshao judged that if Master Lingye wanted to protect this place, there were only 3 ways. The first was to attack Zhang Yan, but he and sect leader Qin wouldn't just stand by. Even if the Nether Spring sect leader Liang Xuani tried to stop them, he could only block one person at most, and the other person could handle it. The second was to protect with his own magic power, but this wasn't the best plan. The 2 of them could also attack and disturb him. And the safest way was to move Yuya to protect the South Cliffs continent. Back then, Immortal Yao Han could use this treasure to protect the 4 continents, but now Master Lingye didn't have this ability. It might be easy to protect the East Flower continent, but it would be a bit difficult to protect 2 continents. If he really did that, he would be giving the 2 sects a chance. Yu Xuanxiao's gaze turned around and shot a glance towards his left. There was a completely flawless hiltless sword that seemed as if it was constructed from clear light lying horizontally there. However, if he closed his eyes, then he was unable to determine its length, nor was he able to draw out its appearance within his consciousness. This was the Shaoqing sect's treasure, the Taizhua Xianqing sword. As long as Master Lingye showed a trace of intention to protect the South Cliffs continent, he would definitely slash it without hesitation. At the same time, above the South Sea. After Taoist Bai Bai threw out the Hanli divine sand, everything within his sight turned into a dazzling radiance. It was as if a galaxy was unfolding in front of him. Zhang Yan had already seen the power of the divine sand earlier. As long as he did not touch his body, he could not stop his spiritual vigor from dissipating. His life would be in danger. He estimated that even with his rank 5 strength path body, he might not be able to block it. If he used the mysterious rotating heavenly net wall, he might be able to block it, but it was only a possibility. He would not take this risk. Thus, he flicked his sleeve and tossed out the all-heavens combination divine water forbidden light. In an instant, a bright stream of water seemed to flow out of nothingness, emitting a gurgling sound. It stretched out in midair and collided head-on with the starlight. Han Li's spirit was seizing the spiritual vigor while the forbidden light of the holy water was endless. For a moment, both sides were wearing each other down and neither side could suppress the other. However, these two items relied on the user's magic power to activate, and Taoist Bai Pai was at a disadvantage in this aspect. In just a few breaths, he felt that his magic power was running out. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying saw that it would be difficult for him to defend alone, so they quickly released their Hanli divine sand from their left and right sides to support him. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeve calmly, and a forbidden light of the holy water gushed out from both sides, blocking the enemy. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying followed Taoist Bai Pai's instructions and did not dare to casually scatter the sand, they only released it bit by bit. But even so, they could only hold on for a while and felt that they could not hold on any longer. Seeing that the forbidden light of the holy water was still in front of them, and did not seem to be worn down much, the two felt helpless. Hanli divine sand could not do anything. Even if they used their remaining methods, they still could not do anything to Zhang Yan. After a while, Taoist Bai Pai used up all the divine sand in his hand. Seeing that he still could not stop Zhang Yan, he took a deep breath and used another technique. The bronze pavilion beneath him suddenly shone with golden light, and murmurs could be heard. As the base of Yuxiao School, Southern Cliffs continent also set up a forbidden formation after it was invaded by outsiders once. However, it was obviously impossible to protect such a large continent. Even if one really exhausted the spiritual vigor of a continent, it would not be enough. They could only set up a defensive formation under some beautiful mountains and rivers, and this bronze pavilion was formed by the chi of Southern Cliffs continent's forbidden formation. These spiritual vigor were gathered from the thousands of mountains and rivers in the continent. If one did not care about it, it could even block a full blow from a third-degree cultivator. Initially, he had expected that as long as Zhang Yan's forward momentum was blocked, it would not be easy for him to recover. But he did not expect that the surging Xian Qi contained a lot of abyssal heavy water. With such a large amount of water, even the sky demon would not dare to block it, not to mention this forbidden formation. Zhang Yan saw that he had swept all the Hanli divine sand, and with a roll of his sleeve, he kept the remaining forbidden light of the holy water. He only needed to deal with a second-degree cultivator, so he did not need this item. At this moment, there was no threat in front of him. Under the activation of his Fa Li, the speed of his Xian Xiang's charge was a little faster. Seeing this, Taoist Master Bai Pai didn't dare to be careless. He swallowed a few medicinal pills, gritted his teeth, and channeled his spiritual power. He watched helplessly as the Xian Qi surged towards him. An explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and the bronze pavilion collapsed. A ray of light flew out from the broken light. After Bai Bai suffered a loss earlier, he was always on guard. Just now, seeing that the situation was not right, he cast a ray of light and retreated. He didn't suffer any injuries, just a little embarrassed. But even though he managed to dodge it this time, he was still unable to stop his opponent, so he couldn't escape just like that. Once he was far away, he made another hand seal to summon the spiritual energy from all directions. Then, he gathered the tong stop again. However, he could sense that more than 60% of the mountain and water array chi was broken. His heart sank. But at this point, he didn't have any better countermeasures. He could only take it one step at a time. A few breaths later, the bronze pavilion cracked again. Taoist Bai Bai escaped once again and retreated to a distance. He tried to gather the formation qi again, but he realized that he couldn't even move a strand of it. It was obvious that it had collapsed. At this time, he had no other choice but to face the attack personally. He could only shake his body and reveal his Dharma form. In the sky, a ball of dazzling light surged out. Its aura reflected the mountains and rivers, and the starlight illuminated the heavens. There were multicolored clouds flying outside, covering a radius of thousands of miles. Its momentum was not weak. Zhang Yan glanced at the starlight Qi river in front of him, and his eyes flashed. His body leaned forward slightly, the black robe on his body suddenly fluttered, and the surrounding profound Qi sea seemed to be pushed, rumbling as it surged forward. Rumble. Taoist Master Bai Bai's starlight avatar was shattered by the impact, turning into countless specks of starlight and retreating. However, he was quite resilient. Even though he knew that he couldn't win, he still refused to give up. After a few breaths, when the spiritual vigor gathered and condensed, he faced it again, but it was shattered without any suspense. This happened again and again, his Dharma form had dimmed, and the spiritual vigor was gradually declining. At this time, if he turned around and fled, there was actually a chance of survival. But he also knew that if he risked his life to stop the attack today, there might be a chance for him to reincarnate in the future. He could still return to the clan and not lose his identity as an upper-level cultivator. But if he did not care and retreated, the rules of the clan would definitely not let him off easily. So he forcibly gathered his mana and blocked the attack halfway. This time, Zhang Yan didn't even look at it. He activated his Xian Qi and it surged like the sea, crushing over the Dharma form. The specks of starlight were instantly submerged in the boundless mist. At this time, a golden light flew up from the inside. It was Taoist Bai Bai who used the jade pendant to protect his spirit and escaped towards the direction of the mountain gate. When Zhang Yan saw this, he was just about to use the high-altitude thunder shock when he seemed to sense something. He looked up and saw a sharp blade flying out from the void, slashing right on the wisp of divine soul. It instantly shattered like glass. After the saber light killed the Bai divine soul, it seemed to have exhausted itself. Its brilliance gradually dimmed and finally dissipated in the atmosphere. Wu Yunbi and Zhou Ruiying were shocked when they saw this scene from afar. Ever since Wu Ruyang's death, Zhou Liguang's skills were second only to Hall Master Kang Zhang's, the rest of the Xinjiang could not compare. Who would have thought that today, not only would he be defeated here, his soul would be scattered and scattered, the impact on them could not be said to be small. Zhou Ruiying gritted his teeth and said, "Since Reverend Bai Bai has died in battle, the two of us cannot retreat." Wu Yunbi frowned and sent a voice transmission. "Junior sister Zhou, don't be impatient. We've already done our best this time. It'll be useless even if we go forward to stop him, and we'll even lose our lives for nothing. It's better to leave a useful body." However, Zhou Ruiying interrupted him and said, "I, Zhou Ruiying, am a member of the Zhou clan. Now that outsiders want to destroy the foundation of my clan, how can I turn a blind eye? Peak Lord, there's no need to say anything more. Even if I have to die here, I'll go up and stop him." Wu Yunbi sighed. If the two of them went back together, even if there was a crime, they would have to share the responsibility. However, since Zhou Ruiying did not want to retreat, even if he retreated alone, the sect rules would not allow him to do so. He stretched out his hand and touched the talisman in his sleeve. This was given by the sect before he left. Every grotto heaven in the sect had one, but he could not use it himself. It could only be activated when Venerable Lingya summoned it. Just now, Reverend Bai was brought back to the mountain by this talisman. He thought, if the two of us die, there will be no one guarding the Yuxiao clan. Venerable Lingya may not see such a situation, so why don't we fight it out? Thus, he sent a voice transmission. "Since Hall Master Xenming insists on this, I'll go with you." Once he made up his mind, he no longer hesitated. He activated his Dharma form and charged towards the surging mystical qi. Zhang Yan took a glance but did not stop moving forward. He calmly held on to the dragon's soul and channeled his mana to control the heavy abyssal water. It turned into droplets of water that hung on both sides, waiting for the two of them to come up. However, before the two of them could reach the front, a ray of spiritual light flashed in the air and took the two of them away. Zhang Yan scoffed coldly. He wasn't surprised by this. However, at this moment, there was no one obstructing his path, and the path ahead was smooth. He wanted to see how Lingya would choose. Would he exhaust his strength to protect the southern cliff continent, or would he directly attack him? As he thought about this, he sped up a little. After about a minute, he saw that the southern cliff's continent was close at hand. He let out a clear shout and gathered all the mana in his body. He rolled up the mystical tide that seemed to cover the heaven and earth. With the sound of endless wind and thunder, he crashed into it. Chapter 1189. Just as Zhang Yan's Dharma power was about to crash into it, a beam of spiritual light suddenly shot out from the Donghua continent. Then, it spread out and shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire South Cliffs continent. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed. He immediately realized that Master Lingya had made a move. He had abandoned Donghua and moved the Jade Cliff to cover the Dingzhou continent. With a quick thought in his heart, since it was like this, then it would be meaningless for him to continue charging forward. With a command of his divine insight, all the roiling profound energy in his surroundings actually vanished layer by layer, and it actually instantly restrained this vast and mighty force into nothingness. Almost at the same time, in the Shaoqing sect's pure grace palace, a sharp light appeared in Yu Xuanxiao's eyes. His body turned into a clear light and rose up. The Taizhua sword on the table also flew up at the same time. The two merged in midair. In an instant, rays of sword light that filled the sky shot out from the Sun Traverser Mountain, crossed the sky, and slashed down on the Donghua continent. At this moment, the Donghua continent had no shelter. If this sword landed, the entire continent would definitely be destroyed. Once the various sects of Donghua lost this place to rely on, this battle would come to an end. However, at this moment, a large tree that supported the heavens and the earth emerged from the continent. There were 3 large leaves on it, shining with endless green light. Qi rose up and actually blocked the sword, preventing it from falling on the central continent. Yu Xianxiao raised his eyebrows. It was not difficult to recognize that this must be a trick of the Taihao school. At this moment, the tribulation fire in the South Cliffs continent jumped and actually reflected into his mind. Previously, he had cut off nearly half of the tribulation fire. Although he had suppressed it, it had not been completely dissolved. Now that it had increased a little, even if it was only a wisp, it could no longer be alleviated. It suddenly exploded and began to burn his Dharma power. This time, he seemed to have fallen into Master Lingya's trap. Not only did he not gain any advantage, but he also fell into it himself. However, in the face of such a situation, he only smiled lightly. The next moment, he was still standing in the pure grace palace, and the Taizhua sword was still there. It was as if just now, everything was just an illusion. Nothing had happened. The Taizhua Xianqing sword was not an ordinary killing sword. It contained a strand of divine will left behind by ancestor Hongba. When the sword was unsheathed, it could reflect the future for an instant. Therefore, unless the sword was not unsheathed, it could not be used. Every strike would hit its target. He looked in the direction of the Donghua continent and said to himself, "It's not time yet." 30,000 feet underground, the Nether Spring sect master Liang Xuani was submerged in the yellow smoke. He saw that Yuya's spiritual light had turned to protect the Southern Cliffs continent. He had already made a hand seal and was about to attack. However, to his surprise, the Qinsong and Shaoqing sects did not move and did not show any signs of attacking. He thought for a moment. He retracted his movements. Outside the Southern Cliff continent, after Zhang Yan retracted his mana, he looked back and saw that the tribulation fire behind him had already caught up and was not far from him. He decided not to stay here any longer and sent a voice transmission to Tao Zhenren, "Fellow Taoists, please take care of their souls. If you win this battle, if you are willing, you can enter my Qinsang sect to cultivate in your next life. After giving his instructions, he dove into the sea and hid in the demon treasury again. Tao Xinren saw him leave and bowed, then turned and flew away. He returned to the array disc and sat down. Even if Master Lingya withdrew Yuya, as long as he did not leave, then he would still be a deterrent. Just now, when they came out, there were 3 of them, but now he was alone. Looking at the 2 empty cushions beside him, he could not help but sigh. At the same time, in another place, Jinren Kongjing saw that the southern cliff continent was finally safe and heaved a sigh of relief. He turned to look at the huge tree that was rising from the Donghua continent, then turned around and bowed to Shang Shooting, who was sitting not far away. He said pleasantly, "Sect Master Shang, before that Yuya retreats, the safety of the Donghua continent will depend on your sect." Shang Shooting said, "What are you talking about, Taoist Kongjing? Since our Taihao school is an ally of your sect, it is only right for us to help." This huge tree was one of the 3 divine trees in his sect, the Great Pan Tree. It was left behind by the founding master of his Taihao school. There was a technique in it that was connected to the Hanxiu True Shifting Great Void Defense Formation. When it was activated, it could uproot the earth and connect the sky, connect the spiritual vigor of the 4 directions, and protect the land, mountains, and rivers. Jinren Kongjing nodded and smiled, but then he frowned. He realized that the fate energy on his side had weakened a lot. Just now, they could only deal with the attacks and could not fight back. Moreover, Jinren Baibai was killed. With this series of events, people's hearts were wavering. He thought about it and felt that in such a situation, he had to change his original plan of not doing anything. Thus, he looked at the crowd and said, "Since we are here, we should not do nothing. No matter what, we should first think of a way to destroy the formation of Qinsang School's mountain gate." Tan Dingxian was overjoyed when he heard this. He immediately stood up from his seat, cupped his fist, and said, "Fellow Taoist Kongjing, please wait for a moment. I'll go unfold the formation, and then all of you can start working together." It was not an easy task to attack the mountain gate of Qinsang School. They had to guard against the cultivators of Qinsang School who could attack from the inside. Once the square formation map was opened, both sides would have the protection of the mountain guarding formation, which could reduce the opponent's advantage to the minimum. Jinren Kongjing bowed back and said, "Thank you, sect leader Tan." Tan Dingxian ordered Bu Jingsu to stay behind to entertain the guests. He himself retreated from the high pavilion and went to the top of the formation door. With a point of his finger, an auspicious cloud flew over. He sat cross-legged and took out a bronze bell. He shook it lightly and immediately hundreds of rays of light flew over. When they arrived in front of him, they all turned into talismans and hovered in the air. He took out a meter-long jade mallet from his sleeve and knocked on a few of the talismans. Following his action, the square formation map below him suddenly emitted an infinite amount of auspicious light. The misty clouds stretched for hundreds of thousands of miles and slowly pressed towards the great pool of Dragon Lake with a force that could overturn the sky and overturn the sun. Jinren Kongjing stood up and walked to the balcony in front of the pavilion. When the Jin people saw him like this, they also stood up and walked out together. Reverend Kongjing looked at the muddy great swamp below, then he looked at the cloud of mist in the sky that did not disperse for 10,000 years. He pointed with his finger and said, "Today I uphold the righteous path, come with great momentum, shall overturn the foundation of 10,000 years." When the Jin people heard this, they all chimed in. Jinren Kongjing was the first to swing his arm and cast a dazzling starlight towards the mountain gate formation of Qinsang School. When he made his move, the Jin people behind him responded. They all took out their talismans and struck downwards. This move was not to break the formation, but to prevent the people of Qinsang School from obstructing them. They were trying their best to cover for them. For a moment, in the night sky, more than 10 rays of rainbow light that were as bright as stars could be seen. They drew lines of starlight in the sky and attacked from tens of thousands of miles away. When Sect Master Qin saw that Yu Xiao's attack was not small, he said, "Yuntian, go and cast the profound formation passed down by the founding master." Qi Yuntian bowed his head and left. Taoist Master Meng also stood up, bowed, and said, Master, since Yu Shao has already attacked, disciples should go to the corner of the formation with the other Taoists. Sect Master Qin waved his horsetail whisk and nodded. Go. The 4 Jin people, Meng, Shen, Mu, and Sun, stood up at the same time. After bowing to Sect Master Qin, they went to their respective corners. At this time, a rumbling sound suddenly came from outside and traveled to the inside. The attacking talisman had already hit the mountain gate formation. Sect Master Qin's expression was normal. He looked down and picked up a talisman from the table. With a sweep of his horsetail whisk, he opened the restriction and threw it out. In an instant, a dark light flew out of the mountain gate. However, it did not get entangled with the outside talismans. Instead, it passed through the Sky River and flew into the Donghua continent, heading straight for the huge pan tree. Shang Shooting was startled at first, then he laughed. Attacking the pan tree was indeed the best plan. This tree was not that simple. It could be said that it had existed since the beginning of the West Continent's Xian path. Back then, the founding master was able to ascend with the help of this tree. It could be said that it was extraordinarily tough. Even the mountain gate formation of Taihao School relied on this tree to suppress it. It would not be easy to break it. Qinsang School had chosen the wrong target to find trouble with this tree. However, in the next moment, when he saw what was flying, his expression changed drastically. He saw a demon insect with 6 eyes and a body several miles long biting the tree trunk. The sound of its jaws chewing was like metal scraping against metal. It was extremely ear-piercing. Shang Shooting carefully sensed the vital energy on the demonic insect, and he felt it was ruthless, violent, and revealed a savage and vicious aura, and he couldn't help but cry out involuntarily. Heavenly Demon. As soon as the words of the Sky Demon came out, everyone present was moved. Jinren Kongjing was also shocked. Even with his shrewdness, he could not remain calm at this moment. Qinsang School's Xian Shu had blocked their way back, and they could not go back to help. Yu Ya was not here, and they were relying on this huge pan tree to suppress the Ding continent. If this demon insect destroyed it, the consequences would be unthinkable. He did not dare to think further. He turned to look for Xiao Lingyun, pointed, and asked, Sect Master Xiao, what kind of demon is this? Xiao Lingyun looked at it for a moment, thought for a while, and said with difficulty, judging by its appearance, it might be the legendary sun-swallowing green locust. Jinren Kongjing shouted, how is that possible? Wasn't this demon insect suppressed by the West Continent cultivators in the West Ocean's Eye? Bu Jingsu looked up and said, just now, when Jinren Zhang avoided the tribulation fire, he went to the West Ocean's Eye. Is there a connection between the two? Xiao Lingyun said, if that's the case, I'm afraid it will be difficult to deal with. His Southern Flower sect was good at taming beasts and subduing demons, but to deal with sky demons, they were still lacking. The sun-swallowing green locust was extraordinary among the many ancient sky demons. The so-called green did not refer to its appearance, but to its noble status. To be able to be mentioned in the same breath as the demon emperor and dragon monarch, it was obvious how powerful it was. Behind them, Palace Master Su Heng took a step forward and asked, Sect Master Shang, can that divine wood block this demon insect? Shang Shooting was silent. Just by looking at his expression, the answer was already self-evident. Before everyone could think of a countermeasure, they suddenly heard the loud sound of water outside. Turning to look, they saw a boundless tide surging in from the sky, and it was rushing